That's Steve or Brian. Brian, do you want to give your announcement again about the application or the change of a just quick agenda change, and then we can go
Sure.
to
So for the application 5 Blackberry Lane, the special permit for the rest home, they've submitted an extension of time letter, so their hearing will not be tonight. It will be later in January.
Brian, can I ask when you received that?
Yeah, the extension of time,
Yeah,
it was received maybe 15 minutes ago prior to this meeting. And that's due to a public a notification
some
issue.
notification issues. Okay. With that, we will go to roll call.
Sure. Mr. Batchnik?
Here.
Mr. Williams?
Here.
Mr. Patches? Ms. Jordan Byron?
Present.
Mr. Rowena?
Here.
Mr. Schulman?
here.
Ms. Wells?
Here.
Ms. Lingalis?
Here.
Ms. Lankowski?
Here.
And Mr. Cantor?
Here.
Okay.
With that, I think we have 10 commissioners on tonight, so I'll just making sure I seat folks. For the first one, Diana and Anna will be seated. First one up is 2024-53 SPR, Jonah Godai, 3 Raymond Terrace. Do we have the applicant on?
Yes.
Awesome. So over to you for a quick presentation.
Okay, so forgive me, I haven't been on here before. I submitted all the paperwork for the permit process for a ADU in an already existing 2-floor garage, only utilizing the top floor. The square footage is small within the requirements. It already has a permit for like a shop bathroom, so all it would need really is some light finishing and somewhat of a kitchen. Thanks, Brian. So these are this is the floor plan, all sketched out. Those are walls and everything like that. It's already existing. It just is blank up there besides a bathroom. That dormer area is what would be a living room. It has an inexpensive finish up there, the sheetrock, and a bathroom, basically. Well, a toilet and a sink. So it would need some work there, but there's nothing being done to the outside of the structure just to make the inside viable for human living. And that's really it. So nothing, no construction noise. All the neighbors have been 15 of my neighbors have been given their certified mail, and only 2 neighbors have come over to me to ask what I was doing, because they don't speak the language, so I translated. But other than that, I haven't heard anything really against it.
Do folks have any questions for the applicant?
Lou, you're muted.
I have a question.
Go ahead, JJ.
Sure.
Okay.
Hi.
Can you share your screen again with the structure?
Oh, that was Brian helping me with that.
Oh.
Hold on one second. The outward, so this is a view from this is from my gate in my driveway.
Mhm.
All of the land you see before that 2.5 car garage, the right
Mhm.
side is a workshop. That's all cement. There's no concrete. So there's about back there's 5 or 6 parking spaces, and then my driveway is a car length of 3 more, plus there's through 2 parking spaces out front, which could be 3.
You answered my question.
Thank you. I'm just making sure that's all concrete. That's all
No,
concrete.
my question was going to be about the parking spots.
Gotcha. Yes. I actually drew that out. Brian has it actually. I don't know which screen it might be on, but so there's the footprint, there's the mailings. And right there, I actually mapped out. So to the highlighted lot is my lot. Toward the right-hand side on the street is my house, and toward the left is the garage, and all that dark area between the garage and the street is all concrete. So there's like 10 parking spaces at my house, 9. Yeah.
But you're not gonna be using all those. parking
No, but
spaces?
if there would always be enough spaces for some single person or like a mother and a child or someone to live back there, or to rent back there.
I see you have a pool.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
How far from the ADU is the pool?
About 20 feet. And the whole property has stockade fence around it, about 6 feet tall.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah. Mm-hmm. And the pool actually, when it's open, has a floating alarm in it where if anything over 10 pounds, it actually alerts my phone and my husband's phone. So,
Wow,
yeah,
okay, thank you.
you're welcome.
Mr. Schulman, I think you had a question?
Yeah, is the garage used as a garage?
Yes, I do a lot of landscaping personally. So, my 2 motorcycles are on the left-hand side and I have landscaping equipment, on the right-hand side it's my own use, though. Yep. And then to the right, I have a workshop where I fix all my tools.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Does anybody have any further questions? If you do, okay.
Did we go over ventilation?
Sorry, you muted yourself, Darius. I couldn't hear what you said.
Did we go over ventilation?
At the top of the garage having ventilation. It has ceilings just like a attic would, so it has the venting going up, and actually you could see on top of the garage on left and right of the dormer, the popped out windows. There's actually things that spin and that lets the airflow go through the roof. Actually, those are actually vents. It's hard to see, but on the left and right hand side of the top of the roof, right at the, yes, thank you, Brian. They spin.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Any last questions? It seems like a pretty straightforward ADU application, which is exciting. With that, do we have a motion to approve so we can see Brian can bring up the language? Anna, was that a motion to approve? Galen seconds. So seems straightforward to me. Does anybody have any questions or comments here?
Just one question, Nick. Do we specify in any of these ADUs how many people can live in the ADU?
So that would get captured under our family definition, which is no more than 3 unrelated people living together.
Right. Okay, and it doesn't matter how many bedrooms it is or how many rooms it is, it's just the total space.
Right. The 700 square feet, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Same as like a single family house, right?
Right, yeah.
Okay. With that, any other questions? Not seeing any. I think we can move to vote. Can we just do a quick roll call on this?
Sure. Let's see if I can remember. Ms. Tabashnik?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Ms. Jordan Byron?
Yes,
Mr. Rowena?
Yes.
Mr. Schulman? So yes. Ms. Wells?
Yes.
Ms. Langalis?
Yes.
Ms. Lankowski?
Yes.
And Mr. Cantor.
Yes.
That's
Glad to
unanimous.
see another ADU built in the city.
Thank you guys for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jonna.
Thank you.
Next is a preliminary review, so we don't have to seat. Everyone can participate here. This is going to be 2024-55 M/SP Mary Grace Vona and RVCV LLC, 127, 131, 135 Richards Avenue. So this is for the map change and special permit applications for the elderly housing development. And I'm not sure who the Attorney Blank, are you?
Yes,
Awesome. So I'll hand it over to you for a preliminary review.
thank you. Good evening, Adam Blank, live here in Norwalk, counsel for the applicants. Most of the same team has a meeting currently for another project that's in front of the Harbor Commission this moment. So they may be in and out, and I apologize if you have questions that we're not able to answer. We'll get you answers at the next appearance on the calendar or in advance of that if we can. But with me, Matt Pop may or may not be with us. Matt Kivijarv, Matt Pop, by the way, is the landscape architect. Matt Kivijarv is the project engineer. I see Jim Jameson, the architect, has joined us, and Carlo Vona, representative for the ownership, may or may not be with us or on the Harbor meeting. I'm going to give you just a quick overview, and then the other folks that are here, they'll just be here to answer questions. We're not going to have everybody give you lengthy presentations tonight. Let me share my screen. Okay. So you should have up front an aerial, and it's a little, these are the GIS or through the DPW, their aerials. It's a little dated. This parcel here that looks vacant is 125 Richards. This is actually a elderly housing development done by Jerry Efron and Spinnaker that's been up and running for a number of years with a waiting list. Then right here, 127 and 135 is an approved elderly housing development. It's a 13-unit approval for the same applicants that are here in front of you today. At the time, it hasn't been constructed yet. The approval is still valid, but we haven't put shovels in the ground. This project, when it was approved, we didn't own 131, this little piece in the middle here. The hope was always that there would be an opportunity to acquire it, but it just wasn't a reality at the time we originally applied. So the application was for 127 and 135 only previously. That was approved, as I said. And this in front of you is what you've approved, the existing approval. And you can see right here, this is the piece that we didn't own that wasn't part of the original application. Now that and you can see it was laid out that would allow for that to be built into this project if we acquired it. It has in fact been acquired. And so we're proposing to add 3 units, 2 buildings, but 3 units. Otherwise, it stays almost identical. The only, I would say, real change is your staff said, hey, is there any way you can move this closer to Richards Avenue to create even more of a buffer along the river in the back? Under the new zoning regs, there's a sizable setback here. So we were able to move it, but it was only by about a foot or two. So we pulled it forward towards Richards Avenue by about a foot or two. Otherwise, it's essentially identical. The other sort of odd thing is that this is your current zoning map. When the original approval happened, these properties, including this is the 125, those were all, this was rezoned, I'm sorry, 127 was rezoned CD2, 131 and 135, so that's this piece here, 131 and 135 were zoned CD1M, even though this was already approved as a development, but they were zoned differently in the rezoning. And none of these zones actually allow elderly housing because they all have approvals and these were built, they're grandfathered in. But this piece, because it doesn't have an approval, needs to be zoned to allow for elderly housing so that we can add those 3 units and make it a cohesive development. So the CD1M is the zone that in your current regs that allows elderly housing. So we've asked to move 131 into the CD1M, which will allow, again, that cohesive development. And it's not just a map change to then allow sort of any use, but literally it will allow this one piece to be the exact same use as everything around it. So that will be very much in character with the neighborhood. Let me just see if there's anything else I want to add. The new units will be handicap accessible. They'll all have first floor primary bedrooms, single car garage, and they'll have an ability to park a second car in the driveway. Of this site, 25% of the site will be a conservation area. Actually, over 60% of the site will be open space and green area, and that does include the 25%, that's the conservation area. Under your current regulations, only 40% actually needs to be open space, but we're proposing 60% be open space. So in any event, I think it's a small change. It's a meaningful change. I think it'll be helpful for that block, and I don't see any negatives of allowing the map change in the special permit amendment. That's my sort of 2-minute or 5-minute overview. It's a zoning map amendment and the special permit. And we hope you'll put us on for a public hearing in the near future.
Do folks have any questions for this, about this project? Tammy?
Thank you. Hi, Attorney Blank. Question, are the residents of 139 Richards Avenue, have they been notified of this potential development yet? That's the last sort of single family residence. And then what also about the residents on Beechwood that sort of back up to the back part of the property at 135?
Yeah, yes, everyone's been, well, let me look at the Beechwood. Everyone that's, I think, contiguous, and Brian or Steve will correct me, I think it's within 100 feet now, as well as contiguous, get notice under the new regs. We have given that preliminary notice to all of those folks. The only someone directly across the river, I can pull up the name, but did reach out to me to just ask if we were going to be increasing development down towards the river. And that was the only resident comment that I've received.
Okay. I know we haven't even gotten to the application process, but what Jerry Efron did down the street, I think it's very attractive. And yes, it's limited to seniors, but to call it sort of elderly housing, like the Marvin over in East Norwalk or something, I think is somewhat misleading. I mean, are these going to be high-end rentals for seniors?
Yes, and they are essentially independent living. They offer services, but they're rarely taken up on those. It's what you've got those defined term as elderly housing. It's essentially the same architect, not essentially the same architect, almost identical plan to what Jerry and Clay did next door, has designed this, same landscape architect, same engineer. So it's very, very, very similar project. And there's sort of a huge demand for it. There's a huge demand for a lot of things, but there's a meaningful demand for this product.
Sure. So I don't know, this probably isn't a question for you, but for like Brian or Steve, this would really be to me like age limited housing as opposed to senior housing or anything remotely related to assisted living. Do we rename it?
I think it's age targeted. We're throwing around a lot of terms, but it's really, that's who it's meant for. It's not restricted or required, but I think that's the marketplace.
Age targeted. Okay, thanks. Steve.
It is, I mean, Ms. Langalis, I will say, I have talked with, because Jerry and Clay have another development that's essentially the same over towards the Westport line behind the Pepperidge Farm building on Fullen. And so that's been up and running for a couple of years as well. You know, I would say the difference between it simply being age restricted is that they do a fair amount of interior alcohol maintenance and cleaning for a lot of these residents. They will also come in and change light bulbs and do handyman kind of services that a normal landlord of a freestanding structure wouldn't do. And they'll do almost anything else that's asked for, but typically they're not asked of much other than those types of services.
Sure. And I'm the one commissioner that's the broken record on this, but has the developer looked into selling these as condominiums rather than adding to the rental stock?
I don't know what Carlo's plans are for sale or for rental. I mean, they're structured right now as rental. I don't know if he'll ultimately go condo. I'm happy to push the issue with him.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none, I think we can move. We don't need an official motion here, Brian, right? Or Steve? No. Okay, cool. So we'll see you soon then, Adam, on getting this on the regular agenda.
Thank you.
Next, which will be Adam again, 2024 64 CAM SPR IJ Group LLC 24 Belden. The goal here is a preliminary review and really the approval for a third-party architectural peer review. From a seated standpoint, let's go with Commissioner Tabachnik and Commissioner Pachas. And then over.
Quickly to interrupt, Adam, if
Yep.
anyone's still on for the 5 Blackberry application, it is not going to be heard tonight. They submitted an extension of time, so that's not going to be until January if anyone from the public is waiting for that one.
Attorney Blank, over to you.
All right, thank you, appreciate it. Again, still Adam Blank. So I'm here for IJ Group LLC, owner of 24 Belden. Similar to the last one, I know it's your first look, you got a long agenda. I'm gonna give you probably 5 minutes of an overview, but we do have with us Ray Sullivan, the project architect, Vince Hines, the engineer, and I believe Jason Enters and Jason Milligan on behalf of the property owner, IJ Group. They'll be here to answer questions, not to present tonight. So with that, I'll share my screen again. So should be up and running. 24 Belden is this, it looks black from the overhead here. It's called the Confluence. I think most of you probably know it as the Avalon, sort of surrounds it on both sides. It's at Belden and Burnell. This is the Wheels sort of transit stop or bus depot is located right here. Winners, the off-track betting is in this corner here. And then you've got the Yankee Doodle, the parking garage is directly across the street from us here. Zone CD4, it's about 1.43 acres. Existing on the site is a 6-story office building, which is here. This is looking up Burnell to the right and looking up Belden in front of us. That office tower is technically, I guess it's a 5-story office tower over ground floor retail. It's about 45,000 square feet of office space and a fairly similar amount of retail space in the current condition. The proposal that we've submitted for that we're asking for you to sort of, well, we're not asking, but we're hoping that you'll move us forward, which we believe is to an architectural review, is to leave that existing tower here and on, this is facing Belden here, putting in another building or tower that would be apartments, and putting in a third building or tower here that would be a hotel. We were in front of you, or fairly, we meaning Mr. Milligan and myself and most of this team were in front of you recently on 23 Isaacs. That was extended stay. This would be a non-extended stay, a traditional hotel. Although this is a significant sort of vertical expansion, the footprint itself is only going to expand by about 2,400 feet. The hotel would be a 96 key or 96 room hotel. The apartment would be 100 unit apartments, about 44,000 square feet of office space would remain. And the retail on the ground level would be shrunken to somewhere in the 25 to 30,000 square foot range. As part of the apartment development, 10 of those units will be workforce under your regs. I'll show you just, this is looking, you're on Belden, and you're looking between the two Avalon or Confluence buildings at that drive. This is the apartment side. This is looking at it straight on from Belden. This is the hotel. This is the office. And to give you a sense, it's, red brick, and I'm going to call it black, but it's this manganese iron spot black, grayish brick materials, along with some hardy board in the middle, and that kind of carries through. You can see the brick, the red and the black brick, sort of throughout. The color doesn't translate perfect, but that's the general sense of things. The floor plan, like I just said, you've got some parking underneath the building. You've then got your retail is the yellow here at the ground level, the base of the apartment, hotel, and then hotel, office, and apartment carry forward up all 6 levels. The property it's an odd shaped property. The Confluence building or the old Avalon is sort of in the middle, but the red is actually the property lines here. So it's got this weird strip in here, and the work is all here and here. This is where the work is. The Norwalk River's back here. So this in fact is a CAM application and a site plan. But there isn't going to be an impact on the coastal resources because the work's way over here, not down by the river. And that is my, I guess, 5-minute.
How much parking's underneath?
The parking, I would say the parking is complicated. We hope to uncomplicate it a little bit over the coming weeks and months. There's parking that's shared, that's ours, and that's shared parking with the Confluence and the Avalon. There's about 290 spaces that are we have some access to, whether we own them outright or whether they're shared. And then of course the Yankee Doodle garage right directly across the street. And one of the things we've been saying sort of all along is that I mean we like the elimination of the parking regs, which gives us flexibility to move things around. And Jason's got quite a number of properties that we can move parking as needed, but we can also shift to valet. I mean, obviously we have to come back in front of you, but if there ever becomes a parking problem, which would be a good thing, by the way, not a bad, because it means this area is doing well. If there is if that does exist, then we come back with a valet parking plan, and we can provide substantially more parking than self-park.
Attorney Blank, is there actually a demand for an additional 100 hotel rooms in the downtown area?
Well, I'm gonna.
As you pointed out, we just approved.
So I'm gonna give you a yes and a no. So the yes is there's a demand for a 100-unit hotel. The no is that there's not a demand for a 200-unit extended stay hotel, which is why we filed, it's not on your agenda tonight, but for 21-23, it's approved as 220 or so extended stay rooms. We have an application in to modify that, to split that between apartment and hotel. We've got a hotel consultant working with us on both projects, and we think that there's demand and national brands that we can partner with for both projects at about 100 rooms each for a total of about 200.
Is there any way to bring the sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just, is it appropriate for us to ask you to share with us the studies that have been done to justify that? I mean, I know that you don't really have to.
I can answer that.
I'd be very interested in seeing that.
I'll answer it. I definitely don't want to share it with you, but one of the things that the studies come back with is staggering them. So it'll be staged, and there's a lot of other layers, and as you can imagine, it's big money. It's tens of millions of dollars for each one. The money's not going to chase when it's not there. So the study shows it. There's other hotels kind of floating around. You guys approved one down in Sono. All of the same people know each other. The brands know each other, and they don't want to cannibalize either. So it also depends on how fast the college grows. They're growing. They doubled in size from year over year. So it's a fair question, but there's a lot of other people involved with a lot of other opinions. Having to have you guys weigh in also is probably too much to bear, especially when I think the people putting in 20, 30 million bucks will be more worried than you. Plus, it's proprietary.
Would it be possible to bring the affordable housing percentage above 10%? More studios or smaller apartments?
So I would on to point something out. I was thinking it doesn't necessarily have to be tonight, but these are designed to be naturally affordable. They're small, and we're thinking more. I hate to use terms because they're all capitalized. They actually mean stuff, but they're going to be workforce apartments. I just don't like the label. You know, they'll be subject to market risks and market forces, but they will be designed just like the other people. You know, Jerry Efron and Clay, they're in their 70s. They designed old folks' homes. We're designing for younger people. That's sort of the way we're thinking. There's a 45,000 square foot office space next door, and a lot of the tenants we're talking to, we have signed leases that they would love their people to be able to be close and have affordable housing. So I would say anything's possible, and I actually be willing to sell it to you or anyone else that wants to change that to something more affordable, but that's not our business model.
It's not your business model, but you said they're naturally affordable.
They're naturally affordable. Yeah, it's just a lowercase a involved with that. Affordable.
At what AMI? What percentage AMI are they naturally affordable?
It's
whatever
not
you require.
AMI. It's a size and the affordable rent. That's what it is. They're starter apartments.
But 10% of them are subject to whatever you require.
Yeah, we will, it's a site plan approval. We will comply with the 10% requirement. I'm certain they're not going to offer to have a mandated affordable cap that exceeds what's in your regulations. But they are, I mean, if you compare like a Spinnaker project to this, these are much smaller units with a much lower amenitized buildings that will not compete with your train station buildings from Spinnaker
Or Waypoint.
Or Waypoint. They're going to be at a lower price point because they're smaller units with less amenities.
Have a question?
Go ahead.
What level of occupancy do you have in the office building now?
Low.
Low. Are you considering changing that use at some point in the future?
Definitely not.
Okay, thank you.
Too much office space has been disappeared. We need a mixture of uses downtown in that area. And I've got very high demand for the office space that's there. So I'm very confident we're going to get some amazing businesses to come in there and coexist. And it's.
And Jason, you know, Jason he said to, at least privately to us, and I'm sure he will say it today too, but is that, you know, because of his various interests in this area, he needs office space to throw people on the streets, to support the restaurants for lunch, and to make all of his other businesses work as well. So he more than other landlords really wants office space.
And with a full office building, the parking still works?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So I have a question, and this is about the existing businesses. in order to erect these two buildings, how many businesses or buildings will be leveled or displaced?
Zero.
Zero. Because the last time we spoke about the extended stay, you said it was on the same footprint, that it was not extending over anything. But the artist markup that you have, it seems to have a much wider footprint.
Well, this is a different address than the other one. We started talking about both, but that's a different site.
Yes, it's a different site, but you are erecting a brand new building, two brand new buildings, as a matter of fact.
This property is mostly vacant. It's almost entirely vacant.
And has been for 12 years.
So no existing buildings are there. No one's going to be displaced. No building's going to be just demolished.
Well, slow down. We're not demolishing it. Show, if you want to show the other picture.
Yeah.
That tower, the retail below the first floor there will be modified. There's some structural components that's being engineered now. It's on stilts. All of these buildings start from a podium. So even if you look at the Tyvek building, or you look at watch what they're doing, RMS is doing over by the YMCA, they build a concrete podium and then they frame it up from there. So where the retail roof is, that is already concrete. It's got bar joists and concrete and a roof on top. So what we're doing is basically keeping that podium and building on top. And so it's actually great because it's not disrupting hardly anything. No, you can't occupy underneath that while that's taking place, but it's going to be staggered and staged as the market can dictate and the professionals can organize.
And
but
there has been
all currently vacant.
Yeah.
But the retail is currently vacant, but that not for long.
There's also been, I know you guys have had a push for sustainability over the last few years, and by preserving what's there, this is way better for the environment than putting a little solar on the roof and of a new building and demoing what's existing. This is pretty environmentally friendly.
Thank you.
Attorney Blank or Mr. Milligan, were you working in conjunction with the city and the state with the recent, I believe it was $14 million worth of street improvements in the area? Was one the cause of the other, or the other way around?
I would say I want to give credit where credit is due. I'm very happy that there's a lot of attention, and this is the year of Wall Street, as Bob Duff likes to say. And they're creating fertile soil to plant seeds in. It definitely helps. I would say they're somewhat separate, but we communicate with them, and the professionals that we've hired for these projects are very close with the professionals that work for the city because they do a lot of projects. So there's very thoughtful interaction between them. So I would say, and relationships have gotten a lot better as of late. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but there is definite coordination, if not like, chicken or egg type of discussion.
Yeah. So you've been thinking about this for a little while.
I've been looking at this building when I was across the street for 10 years, and I've been trying to acquire it all of that time. And it's finally, this timing was right that things worked out.
Great. And what I think I've said this before in some of our other urban core projects, but the retail does not seem to activate the street the way a lot of us want. What's your goal for getting, what type of retail do you want in the lower level of these buildings?
I'll use an analogy. Disney World is the only place I know of that owns and controls everything. So they put one malt shop, one movie theater, and like Celebration Florida or other places. We're subject to operators and things that you can't buy on Amazon. So, getting your haircut and buying certain clothes and shoes that, they're tricky to order, but, and food. So I have strong desire to have the activation, but it's interesting how people come up with stuff. And I would love to see, active storefronts. And one of the ways to mitigate it too, I'm close with a lot of artists down there. We rent to several artists. Putting art in empty windows is something we've already talked about. The tricky part is if there's going to be construction, it could get damaged or dusty. But I am in deep discussion with a large retailer. Let's not say it's like a 6 out of 10 of what if I could check all the boxes, the same boxes that you'd like to check. But it's a big retail space. That used to be a mall, right? So.
Yeah.
And within this retail establishment that we're talking to, there might be some carve-outs and other ways to kind of program the space. But there'll be things to look at, there'll be window displays, and there'll be foot traffic. So that's all good things.
Great. Well, I hope as you think about the design, fine line details, but that the people that live there, go to the hotel, walk out onto the sidewalk and not just get in their car in the parking lot, and then there's nobody, looks like nobody's there.
Well, it's funny you say that. That's one of the reasons I actually don't want the train stop there. It's not happening anyway, but we want people to live and work in the neighborhood, which also means they don't necessarily need a car. And I got to tell you, we've built quite a few smaller units in the neighborhood, and most of them are occupied by people who live and work in the neighborhood. And maybe they use the car once a week, or they Uber, or they don't have a car. There's people in their 20s don't need a car. They have a bike, and the bike trail takes you far, and it keeps getting better. So I think some of the visionary people that envision areas without cars, it's coming out, and I support it, and it's working.
So, in the other building, on the other side of the hotel, how many apartments? Well, I mean, have you considered student housing in a way?
Yes.
Okay, and so will that fit into your plan?
The thing that's tricky is there's a lot of rules. So right now is what we're applying for, and this is what we have planned. But the colleges, they're a tenant of mine, so we're talking to them all the time, and they're working on their second dorm, and we hope that they get reach halfway to the way to their goals. They have big aspirations, so the idea is to get lots of different housing over there, and I don't think this one in particular will end up being student housing. We've got other ideas, and the student housing today are like these pods a lot of times where they're kind of like have a little bit of a kitchen, almost not quite an apartment, not quite a dorm. It depends what year you're in school as well. So I would say, good point, good question. Yes, we're thinking about all the above, and we're thinking about the students on the street are some of the best. I saw, I think, 30 of them jogging with one of the professors the other day across the Yankee Doodle Bridge. I was parking my car. It was just great. And you see them at the cafe singing and auditioning for whatever they're doing. Yeah, all that stuff is.
Well, and that would be a great way to activate the area as well.
Yeah, and
100%.
and there is, I mean, Jason does have other properties that potentially could work for a dorm. So it's not like if it doesn't happen here, it's the ability to do it is lost.
We actually hope to be coming in very soon with a dorm idea that would help tie together some other things, but you're getting ahead of us.
Oh, I see.
I think he's gonna get made.
Nick,
No, but all of you, no, but you have the same thinking as us, so it's good thinking.
Yeah, I had that thought when you were talking about the extended stay, and I was wondering, was that going to tie into the performing arts school?
I would say maybe, and that we're coming in and the application's in. I don't know when we're being heard. Has that been decided yet, Adam?
Say that once more.
23 Isaac Street, the amendments, you've submitted those, right?
Yes,
So we're going to be heard. We'll be back to you in a couple of weeks, right?
maybe December 4th, but I'm not certain.
Okay, great.
Lou, I think you
yeah,
had
you're looking for a motion
correct.
to have this reviewed by our peer reviewer.
Yes, sir.
I'd make that motion.
Do I have a second?
I can second it.
I saw Commissioner Rowena's hand. So with that, I think we just need a quick vote. We can do a show of hands on this for the peer review. All in favor, raise your hand. Awesome.
Can we get a
Everyone.
discount on this one? We paid 35,000 for the last one. Sorry, I mean, I had to say it.
With that, any other questions for Attorney Blank? Awesome. With that, I think Attorney Blank, thank you, Attorney Blank. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
It's an exciting project. Next, we have 2024-60 CAM and SPR. This is the 381 Connecticut Ave Corporation, Inc., 0 and 4 Duke Place. This is also just a preliminary review, so we don't need to seat anyone. With that, I think we have Attorney Suchi here, so I'll leave it to Attorney Suchi. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everyone. For the record, my name is Liz Suchi. I'm a partner at Carmody Torrance, Sandak and Hennessy. Our firm represents the owner of the property, which is the 381 Connecticut Avenue Corporation, along with the proposed tenant Airgas, which is an existing corporate citizen in Norwalk, currently operating out of a location on Rockland Place. Present this evening is David Genovese. He's a principal of the 381 Connecticut Avenue Corporation, and Doug Krabass of his office. I believe Eric Lindquist, a professional engineer with Ty and Bond, is with us. Matt Pop, landscape architect for the project. Kurt Verdi may be on a Verdi build. And then we have, I believe, Jim Loeffler of Airgas and perhaps Diane Puntel, also of Airgas. Jim is the Southern New England Area Vice President, and Diane Puntel is the North Division Director of Real Estate. We submitted an application for coastal site plan review on October 30th. Neighbors were notified on or about November 7th of the filing of the application, and those neighbors include anyone within 100 feet of the subject property. Certificate of mailing, and that those certificates were returned. We have not heard from any neighbor who has any questions about the project, who has any inquiries. So I think that's evident of how minor this project is in the whole and in relation to other projects you've heard this evening. Eric, would you be kind enough to screen share a few of the photos that we have? For those of you who are not familiar with the site, the property is located at the intersection of Duke Place. This photo was taken today. Duke Place and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Drive. It is a corner lot. There's actually two lots, 0 Duke Place and number 4 Duke Place. 0 Duke Place is improved with a parking lot that has existed for many years. It served, provided parking resource for 4 Duke Place, that is an adjoining lot. 4 Duke Place was improved with a 6,700 square foot building, which was demolished a few months ago. So the site that's before you is both 0 Duke Place, which would remain as a parking lot, and number 4 Duke Place. 4 Duke Place would subsequently be developed with the plan that we'll show you in just a minute. As I mentioned, the property is bounded to the south by Duke Place, to the west by Dr. Martin Luther King Drive, to the north by the recreation facility, which used to be the Sono Sports House. And then to the east, there's another commercially developed property. This is another view of the 2 lots. The one lot with the parking is existing. The other lot that you see with the 2 arrows, that is the 4 Duke Place that used to have the 6,700 square foot building, which I believe was the former home of Bolt Technology. So the application before you is a coastal site plan application, since the property is within the far boundary of the coastal area management zone, as measured from coastal resources that exist to the south and southeast. The property is zoned SDLI, and the FEMA minimum flood for this site is 11 feet. We propose, Eric, would you mind bringing up the site plan, please? We propose the construction, use, and occupancy of a 5,500 square foot building, generally in the same place as the former building. It's oriented a little bit differently, and it would be the site of the new Airgas headquarters in Norwalk. It's a very straightforward building. We have some warehouse space, retail space, office space inside to serve Airgas. The minimum flood elevation of 11 feet plus 2 feet would be met for the finished floor. And that's really about the extent of what I'd like to share with you, other than to say we have submitted the application supporting documentation to all of the SEAC agencies, and those are DPW, WPCA, Fire, SNU, and Transportation, Mobility, and Parking. We received a sign-off from SNU yesterday or the day before, and despite 2 inquiries of the other remaining SEAC agencies, we've heard nothing from them to date. The last inquiry I made was last Friday. At this point, if you'd be kind enough, I'd like Eric Lindquist to walk you through the site plan, and then you'll hear from Matt Pop on landscaping. I believe Jim Luffler might want to speak to you briefly about what air gas is all about. And lastly, David Genovese may have some comments for you as well. One thing I will note for you is that should you approve this application, and we hope that you approve it without the need for public hearing on a coastal site plan is discretionary. There will be a plan that is submitted to the staff in connection with any documents necessary for a zoning permit to show solar on the roof of the building. With that, Eric, would you mind walking the commission through the site plan, please?
Absolutely. For the record, my name is Eric Lindquist. I'm a senior project manager at Time Bond and a licensed engineer in the state of Connecticut. Site plan is pretty straightforward. Attorney Suchi covered most of the items here. You can see the property line is located along this run right here between 0 and 4 Duke Place. The building and the associated parking for it are all on the 4 Duke Place parcel. There are currently 3 curb cuts, all on Duke Place right now. There's one here, which was in the last picture that you saw with the 2-way arrows. There's also another one here, and a third one right here. The 2 that are associated with 4 Duke Place will be eliminated as part of this project, and we will be maintaining the one associated with 0 Duke Place. Since this parking lot is going to stay largely in its existing condition, we'll obviously be closing it off at the end, since we want to add a new driveway entrance off of MLK Junior Boulevard Drive. So that's going to be a new entrance that services, so there'll be a net reduction of 1 curb cut for the site. This one is located probably further than any of the other 3 away from the intersection. It's about the same as this last one, I would say. But this is in large part due to the new zoning regulations, which require the parking to be at the rear of the building. Originally, our layout had the building over here, but it wasn't compliant with the new zoning regs. So we couldn't maintain the driveways over here. We had to slide this up to be adjacent to Duke Place. So we created this new curb cut over here. It will cross over the 0 Duke Place property and come into 4 Duke Place. And it will service a loading area for the building as well as parking spaces located around. We will have a bike rack here to meet compliance to show that we're providing that for the site, as well as the accessible spaces along the front. One thing to note in particular is that as Attorney Suchi noted, that the FEMA flood line is located here. The site is almost entirely within the floodplain. And we need to be 2 feet above the elevation 11. So this building had to be raised up significantly. As you'll recall, the old building was up on, I want to say stilts, but up on columns. So this building has to be elevated 2 feet above that to be at elevation 13. So if we go to the drainage and grading plan, you can see we had to kind of slope up here to create that flush entrance for the loading and pedestrian, user entrance. And around the back, you can see here we have staircases because there's a 3-foot drop off from the finished floor of the building to where the grades are on the south side of the building. So this staircase was added as part of the requirements that we need a door on that side to meet the zoning standards, as well as to provide access out to the street with a new sidewalk going out to the new, I would say, extended sidewalk. There's existing sidewalk there, but just to make up for the 2 curb cuts, we've added that in. For drainage purposes, there were 2 catch basins within the site located here. This is kind of the belly of both parcels. So 0 Duke Place drained into 4 Duke, and 4 Duke drained into its own structures, and they went out to Duke Place. As part of this, due to the slight grading changes we did, we added a new structure in back and bring it out to the front and keep the drainage pattern as a whole the same as it was under the existing condition. We evaluated the use of stormwater chambers underground to provide water quality for the site. We did various perk tests around the back, but the soils are urban soils and they did not perk at all. So we couldn't really provide infiltration. So in order to meet the 80% TSS removal rates, instead of a standard Vortec or swirl separator for water quality, we used a jellyfish style filter. It could be an approved equal or something along those lines, which is, it provides more sedimentation removal so we can meet those target thresholds for oils and sediments and things. So that's been all provided. Utilities will still service the building from the same locations off of Duke Place. And that's really the lion's share of the site. It's a pretty straightforward project, and we're hoping that you guys will agree.
Anyone have any questions for Mr. Lindquist at this point?
Just a quick one. given that the building is going to need to be raised, how are you addressing that issue of accessibility? Will you have a ramp to the entrance?
No, if I didn't explain it properly, let me go back to the grading plan. So we've actually filled up here. So if I were to zoom in on this catch basin, you'll see it's down at 8.4. Proposed grades are up in the 13 range. So we're filling all back here. And we're coming off of Martin Luther King Jr. Drive and coming up, whereas under existing, it goes down. So we're changing the grade on this site, and there's going to be a slight retaining wall here because there'll be a grade change of about 2.5 feet between both sides of this wall.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
Miss
Oh, I'm
Suchi,
sorry. Excuse me.
where is your current business now?
Currently, Airgas is on Rockland Road, Rockland Place.
Oh, just
It
across the street.
occupied Hocon. It took over the Hocon site in 2021. So it exists
Okay,
today.
gotcha. That I was a little confused about that.
Kind of
And
Other
so
side of the other side of Dr.
right,
Martin Luther
it's the other
Drive.
side of the street,
Yep.
basically,
Exactly.
back a little bit. Okay.
Exactly.
And the materials that are being housed or processed in this building are not environmental hazards, or are they highly regulated? I'm not 100% familiar with what it is you're putting in there.
Actually, they're a bit of both. And if you would be kind enough to let us do 2 more presentations, one on landscaping and then one a little bit on the building itself, Mr. Loeffler is available to provide you with that background information of what Airgas is all about. And I think he'll answer your question certainly better than I. If you wouldn't mind
Great.
waiting,
Okay, thank
rather
you.
hear from
Sorry
him
to jump
now.
the gun.
We can certainly have him speak now if that's your pleasure.
The chair, not mine.
Okay, could we just go through the landscape plan
Yeah,
and
let's just
show you
keep going.
elevation? I'm sorry.
No, I was agreeing with you, Liz.
Thank you. So Matt Pop is on next.
Good evening, Matthew Pop, Landscape Architect, Environmental Land Solutions. We're located in Wall Street area of Norwalk. I prepared the landscaping plan before you, which you see here. Just to start with the streetscape, we added a couple of oaks, 4 oak trees, 1, 2, 3, 4. There's some easements right through here, these lines. So this whole area, there's easements. So I didn't plant any trees over the easements. So again, the trees along this street, those would be pin oaks. In this area here where the parking is, just to the right side of the parking, we have arborvitaes, kind of the screen, the parking, arborvitaes, and bayberry. We've got a couple of birch trees right through here. Moving back to the streetscape here, there's an existing small Japanese maple that you're going to maintain. Along this side of the building, we have evergreen shrubs through here. We have our walkway with the door leading down to Duke Place. Along this front face, there's some columns. We have hollies lined up with each column. And then lastly, just along the entrance where those easements are, again, those are easements here, where there's no trees, we did add a few ornamental shrubs, which grow a fairly large, 8 by 8 or so. There's a plant list here. There's right through here is talking about lighting. These are the building light, wall mounted lights. A couple of here, and there's a few on this side here. And we have one pole mount light. It's a 14-foot high, dark sky. The light fixtures, warm tone, 3000K, downward lighting, dark sky compliant. So that's the landscaping quickly. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Excuse me, Mr. Loeffler, if you could come on and give some information to the commissioners about Airgas.
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jim Loeffler. I'm the Area Vice President responsible for our business in Southern New England. So I just wanted to kind of provide a brief overview of who we are and what we do, and then answer any questions kind of specific to the business that the committee may have. So we are one of the largest bulk and packaged gas manufacturers and distributors in the United States. So we have local bulk production at our air separation plant in Basra. We also produce the majority of our packaged gases right here in Cheshire, Connecticut, and then we distribute throughout our network of 11 branches across the state. We also are a leading distributor and reseller of welding consumables and safety products. So we distribute for a number of name brand companies such as Miller Welding, Lincoln, Hypertherm. So a lot of the customers that are coming into our branch are really coming in to buy those hard good items from us. A lot of what we're selling on the gas side is really distributed through our fleet network across the state. So what we're going to have at this particular site is primarily those hard good items, safety items, glasses, gloves, other PPE. We will have a small amount of packaged gases. The majority of those will be inert atmospheric gases, nitrogen, argon. We'll also store argon or oxygen on site. And then we will have a small amount of fuel gases such as propane and acetylene. Everything that we're going to be selling at the new site is exactly what we have on site at our current location. We're just really outgrowing that. Even though we took over for the HOCOM business, we're still co-located at that facility. So we really need kind of some room to stretch our wings and are looking forward to continuing to do business in Norwalk. I did just want to note that, our company was founded in 1982, actually right here in Connecticut, and we have probably the densest population of Airgas locations right here in the state of Connecticut. We were also listed as Newsweek's most trustworthy company in 2013. We were the #1 company in the materials and chemicals industry. We were the only industrial organization the only industrial gas organization who was on their listing. In Norwalk, we serve about 200 customers a month in our store, with thousands more being supported throughout our distribution network. And we've been able to do so safely since acquiring the HOCOM business, going 103,084 days without any safety incident at our current facility, and look forward to working in the same safe manner at our new location, hopefully soon. So I'm happy to answer any questions about our business or what we'll be doing at the new facility.
I have a question.
Yep.
Yes. Do you plan to keep the same head count since you are moving from one area on MLK Boulevard to the other, or do you intend to expand your head count?
Yeah, so initially it'll be headcount neutral. We're going to move the same staff over to the new site, but we're hopeful that with a lot more visibility on that corner lot that we're going to see an increase in traffic. And if that happens, then we're going to have to accommodate with additional heads, but it's not going to be an immediate change for us.
So no new jobs to South Norwalk?
Correct.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
As this is a preliminary review, does anybody have any other questions?
Mr. Chair, if possible,
ahead.
I think Mr. Genovese may want to share some comments.
Oh, absolutely.
Sure. Thanks, Diana. Thanks, Liz. I wanted to share that we've owned the building, this property since 2003. And I just wanted to share with you, because I think it's helpful to also see what was here and just give you kind of a quick sense of the impetus for building. The building that was here, can you see my screen?
No.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Oh, bear with me. Sorry, I've been using Teams a lot more lately, so I'm a little rusty. How's that?
There you go.
Yes.
All right, so that as Attorney Suchi described earlier, the original building on this site, which was here from the 1960s or so, was 4 Duke Place. It served as the headquarters of Bolt Technology. Bolt was a longtime Norwalk company, publicly traded in the oil exploration industry. They made a device that helped people determine where to drill for oil offshore. They had this building, which was their headquarters, and across the way, they had an industrial building where they conducted their manufacturing activities. Unfortunately, for us, Bolt was sold to a company called Teledyne a few years ago, and they relocated the whole business to Texas. So we were able to carve up and lease the manufacturing facility to a bunch of new manufacturers and warehouse companies that are in Norwalk over the years. But we have really struggled to lease this office building. There really isn't demand for office space in this location. But I thought it'd be helpful for you to see what we had here, which was really unrentable. We came close to renting it to a number of nonprofits over the years, but over time, every single one of them decided to go someplace else into a more traditional office location. But I think this picture also just helps explain what Eric Lindquist from Tyne Bond was explaining about the parking and how it worked. This was the curb cut to the under building parking. And then they would exit from here and drive out through that other curb cut. So we're able to eliminate both of those curb cuts with the new plan. And then the customers and employees of Airgas will enter the building from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Drive. And that's really all I have. We did find, I would say, we found the new zoning regulations. I kind of have to share. We found the new zoning regulations really complicated to comply with for a site like this, which sits, facing Martin Luther King and facing Fort Duke, trying to get the parking to the back of the site and just trying to meet all the requirements. I mean, this was, for a small building, it was one of the more complicated efforts we've undertaken in a while. So we're happy to be here before you. And unfortunately, we've put Airgas in a tough spot because it took us so long to figure out how to really make this work with the new regulations. And so we're really under the gun to get going and build this for them as their lease is expiring on Rockland Terrace. So I think Attorney Suchi suggested if there is a way to, if you agree with the proposal, to approve it tonight so we could get going in construction, that would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, I don't think that's possible. And I think we were under your request was for a preliminary review. So that's how the agenda was noticed. I don't see how we could even do that.
But we could get it on the agenda, hopefully on December 4th for final questions and action on the 4th.
Yeah, well, and again, we also got new materials today to review. So I think, we'll take a look at them as soon as we can, but happening tonight was not feasible.
The only other question I have, and if anyone has any questions of us, we're happy to answer them. I would just hope that the commission would see that a public hearing on a building of this size in this location would not be necessary. And again, it is coastal site plan review. With that, we have nothing further at this point to add. Some of the comments that the zoning staff have raised with us, we have addressed in the revised plans. And as I indicated before, we will put solar on the roof, and that can be part of the additional plan that we submit or submit at the time of permit issuance, if in fact you approve this plan. With that, I have nothing further. If you have any questions of the rest of the group, we're happy to answer them.
I don't have any questions. I guess the really question amongst ourselves here is, do we I don't think we need a public hearing for this, but I was curious, what do the other people feel about this? Anyone feel strongly?
Don't really see the need either.
Me either.
Me either.
Okay.
And the proposal seems to be an improvement.
Yeah, this is a building that will stay leased for a long, long time. Airgas, I think, is signing a 15-year lease with us, so we hope they're there for the term of their lease and beyond. But it's really marketable, and it'll keep the tax base up, versus the situation we had before, which was really an empty and unmarketable office building.
Great. So I think go ahead.
I'd like to point out that there will be some jobs, construction jobs when they build a new building. There might not be new employees in this business, but at least there's construction jobs.
And over time, there probably will be new employees as Airgas becomes comfortable with its new space and it becomes more visible. As Mr. Leffler said, I suspect there will be some addition.
Yeah, our current site's very difficult to get into. It's tough for our customers to access. We're limited on the amount of goods that we can stock. So I really think that this is going to be a major impact to our business in a positive way. And it's certainly our hope to add additional employees in the coming years.
Great. So with that, I think we're good with no public hearing, and we can move forward with getting guys on the agenda where it makes sense.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your time tonight, and best wishes to all for a happy Thanksgiving.
Yes, you too.
Happy Thanksgiving. Bye-bye.
Next, I think there may be some need to vote amongst ourselves, so we'll seat Diana and Hector. But this is the pre-application review, Glazer Group LLC and Glazer Inn Condominiums LLC, One River Road, 193 and 194 Perry Ave, the zoning text conversation. Steve, is there anything you wanted to kick off on this before, or is the applicant going to kick it off?
Yeah, I'll be very brief, and then I can happy to answer questions later. So their existing use on the property, the Gray Barn as the tavern, and ancillary uses with that. There was a barn that was approved as part of the commission's original approval of the entire application. That's on property partially owned, I guess, condominium by the applicant. But it's across the street, and there were events occurring in the barn. Staff's position is that those events were never authorized or to be allowed. The applicant is going to talk about that. And then, our position is that, the request may very well be reasonable to some extent with safeguards, but the neighbor should have an ability to weigh in on that through an amended special permit application and public hearing. But I'll allow Mr. Glazer and his representative, Ms. Feinberg, to further address things.
Thanks, Steve. Mr. Chairman, may I share my screen?
Absolutely.
Okay. Can you guys see that?
Yes, we
Great.
can.
Okay, great. So for the record, my name is Lisa Feinberg. I'm a partner with Carmody Torrance, Sandak, and Hennessy. With me tonight is Andy Glazer, representing the property ownership entities Glazer Group LLC and Glazer Inn Condominium LLC. So, uniquely, we're here tonight not to ask for any type of development or redevelopment or even a new use, but rather to seek your confirmation of that one of the long existing uses on the Gray Barns property is permitted under the current approvals. So I recognize that many of you are likely very familiar with the Gray Barns property and its history, but if you'll indulge me for just a few minutes, I'd like to start with a little bit of context and background. So the property, which is formally known as Gray Barns on the Silvermine River, is located at the intersection of River Road and Perry Avenue, and of course, adjacent to the Silvermine River. Today, it's in the CD1L and Silvermine Tavern Village District overlay zone, an overlay that was created for the uses that are out there today. So on the Gray Barns property, these uses are housed in a collection of carefully restored and reconstructed historic buildings, including the tavern, which was formerly known as the Silvermine Tavern and Inn, the inn, which consists of 6 beautiful suites, the Mercantile, which is a market and neighborhood cafe with apartments above, and the barn, which is a community event space. The property also includes 4 single-family cluster homes known as the Village, and then the Glazers, this is their personal residence right next door to the inn. So today the neighborhood's thriving in much part due to the success of Gray Barns, but the area's historic roots run pretty deep. The Silvermine Tavern and Inn operated from this location from 1929 until 2009, and then the mill building where the Glazers now reside was originally constructed over 200 years ago. However, when Mr. Glazer and his wife purchased these properties a decade ago, they were in a state of significant disrepair. And you can see that in these images on the screen. By way of example, there was just a ton of fire damage to the inn here on this slide. So with a passion for historic preservation and restoration, the Glazers believed that they could rehabilitate these buildings and really revitalize this portion of the Silvermine neighborhood. But in order to make that a reality, they understood that the business would have to operate symbiotically with the tavern and inn as the focal point, but not necessarily the financial engine. In 2014, Glazer Group submitted 2 applications to facilitate their vision. The first was a text change application to modify.
Alejandro, sube por favor que tu mamá.
Should I keep going?
Yes.
Okay, so the first application was a text change to modify the Silvermine Tavern Village District regulation, the precursor to the current overlay regulation, and that was done to specifically permit the proposed uses. The second was a special permit application to permit the construction of those uses, and that was application 16-13 SP. Both of these applications were approved by the commission. The restoration of these beautiful buildings, you see the restoration of the inn right here, was completed, and the Glazers have been successfully operating within the parameters of these approvals ever since. Recently, a question was raised regarding the permitted use of the barn, specifically whether it was permissible to host events there. That's what brings us here tonight. So while both the 2014 text amendment and the more recently adopted OSTVD reference the barn as a permissible structure, neither assigns a use to it. However, both regulations, old and new, do specifically permit accessory uses, which are incidental, customary, and compatible with the principal uses permitted in the zone, such as the restaurant and hotel. The regulations didn't assign a use to the barn because the barn was never meant to operate as a standalone principal use. Rather, it was always envisioned as an incidental yet integral component for tavern events, which is exactly how it's been used. The 2014 application materials are replete with references to a community barn, which was intended to be used for events. The project narrative requesting approval included it, the village district consultant report included it, and the approved valet parking plan included the references to the barn being used as an event space. All these documents were also included in your package, so hopefully you had a chance to take a look at them. Mr. Glazer was completely transparent about his intention to hold private parties, weddings, and community events in the restaurant and barn, and the only limitation on these events contained in the special permit approval is the condition incorporating the valet parking plan, which requires valet attendance during these events. With a decade gone since the original approval, memories have faded, but the record confirms that the barn was approved for this purpose in 2014 and has been properly used for this purpose ever since. So tonight, we're just asking you all to reconfirm for the record that events incorporating the barn are an approved permitted accessory use on the property. That's it.
Do folks have any questions for the applicant at this time? Or staff for that matter?
Is the barn like structurally operational at this point, or?
Oh, 100%. It was reconstructed. Mr. Glazer could speak to this more eloquently than I could, but he found the barn in upstate New York and deconstructed it and then rehabilitated and reconstructed it on site. So it's beautiful and absolutely functional, but has stopped being used for events right now while this question's been up in the air. And at, a great, enormous loss to the business, because, while the restaurant and the inn, everyone sort of knows about the restaurant and the inn from a financial perspective, that's not what keeps things moving over there. Without the event space in operation, the rest of it just doesn't work. It's an integral piece of the business.
Thank you.
Do folks have any other questions?
No, not, please go ahead, Diana.
Sorry. So when I read the materials, I found it a little confusing. And is the issue that we are voting just on that single resolution and the wordage in the resolution, or any of the other materials that were given to us?
So really the only thing that is being requested you by the I guess we'll call them, for lack of a better term, the applicant, is that the barn is an event space. Staff's opinion is that while there is language or wording in past minutes and other things about referencing the barn being used for events, that's not defined anywhere. If you look at the Silvermine Tavern regs that were distributed,
Yes.
most of the other areas or uses and buildings are pretty specific in saying what you can do or can't do.
Right.
In my experience with non-residential uses in residential zones, two things come to mind as it relates to this. One is oftentimes those conditions of approval are very specific on what you can do on the property in terms of events, activities, times of day, noise, lighting. All those things are usually very described in great detail. That wasn't the case with this. So my opinion that it was never meant to be at a scope and scale as anticipated today. And just in general, I think the other piece of it is that there are no permits with any of the other city departments relating to the barn being used for any kind of event space in terms of health department with the septic, fire marshal, or building. It's not to say that those can't be achieved, but I don't think they were ever contemplated or approved with what's been done to date.
Steve, one other question. You said that there were complaints from the neighbors about noise. Was the noise, maybe you don't know the answer to this, but was the noise above the allowable level, or was it just noise?
I have not seen a copy of a police report citing a violation of the noise ordinance specifically. But there are some issues related to the noise ordinance in terms of sometimes getting readings at the time of the noise that's occurring. So I don't think there's been a specific noted violation. I would say that though amplified music in close proximity to residences can sometimes, definitely leads to complaints for sure.
Can I speak? Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
With regards to any of the events that we've done in the barn, we have hired our own policemen to monitor our events to ensure both traffic, noise, and time. We have emails from the chief who sent out to the officers who work there, and we have 3 or 4 emails saying everything that we did was well within the limits of the town ordinances, which really are the governing, conditions are conditions, but we conform to all the town ordinances regarding traffic, noise, and time. We end earlier, and we have a valet that we agreed to do, that we spent $150,000 a year to ensure that our traffic and all of our operations run according to the regulations. This was always going to be an event barn. It's spelled out as the attorney stated that it's in all the documents. Everyone understood this. And unfortunately, there's a gentleman to the north of us who is planning on doing a subdivision who has complained endlessly. All the other neighbors around that are directly related support our use, support what we've done, and know what we've done to both the community in terms of building a location that they can all come to, and quite frankly, their real estate values. So this is something that we are very clear we had the use for. We stopped doing it because Steve felt that this was a gray area, and we have lost over $500,000 of revenue by turning down events that we need to continue to operate. The business of Gray Barns, if anyone really understands the restaurant business, the margins are very, very difficult on the a la carte business. The events are what make it worthwhile. Without that ability to do that, it makes it difficult to continue. And to come into zoning with a list of conditions and text chains, all it does is open us up to, a neighbor who's very willing to litigate, to do whatever he has, given the fact that, his interest is purely financial. And we don't think we have to do that. We've been approved. We've operated. This was approved in 2014. Everyone's known what we've been doing there. Everyone has supported. except one neighbor. And the fact that we're being led here and costing us a tremendous amount of money from one neighbor is simply wrong. Why we're even here tonight is simply wrong, with all due respect. Not that, and I simply thought that we'd come to just basically talk to the commission, but quite honestly, I'm not sure why we're even here. We should be operating our event as we have, well within the legal limits. It's very, very frustrating.
Can I just add, I understand where Mr. Kleppin's coming from in the sense that it would be great if the regulations spelled out that, the barn was going to be used for events, but that doesn't happen in any of the regulations with regards to events that are coupled with another principal use. Pick a restaurant anywhere, pick, an art gallery, pick the Maritime Center, pick any space that's unique and interesting, and they host events, but they're not principal uses. They're accessory to the principal use. And that's how this operates too. Mr. Glazer does not host weddings in the barn that are separate from the inn. And in fact, separate from the tavern. When he does host an event at the tavern operates at about more than half capacity that it does on a regular Saturday night, because on a regular Saturday night, he turns the tables. So he sits, all the tables, and then the next turn comes. During an event, it's the same space, but there's no turn. So there are fewer people, and the two pieces don't operate separately. They operate together. And in the best cases, all three pieces operate together: the inn, the tavern, and the barn. So I think that's where there's a little bit of a disconnect. There's no difference between what Mr. Glazer is doing at the tavern with regard to events from what anyone else is doing with regard to events, other than the folks may walk across to the barn to dance instead of staying within the tavern to dance. But it was incorporated in the special permit. There's a reference to it with regard to the valet plan. The valet plan is specifically incorporated as condition 3 of that special permit. And that valet plan talks about weddings, private events, and community events. So it was absolutely contemplated, and it's been working for 10 years. So, we're just asking to continue to do what was contemplated and approved in 2014, albeit it could have been, I agree with Mr. Kleppin, been clearer in the regulations.
Steve, I see your hand up.
Sure. Yeah, let me just reiterate again. None of the departments that would have to sign off on this have signed off on it or given permission to use that barn for any purpose other than storage as a barn. There was nothing from health, fire marshal, or building allowing that use to operate within that building, and that building's been erected for a long time. Yeah, I do agree that it would have been nice if that language was spelled out. However, this is not the Maritime Center. It's not located in a commercial zone. This is in a residential zone. But while it is a village district overlay, it's surrounded by residential use in a 1 acre zoned area. So it's much they're viewed much differently in terms of impacts on from the activities that occur on that site. So I'm not saying that it can't be approved. I'm saying that it was not approved to the extent or manner in which it's being used currently.
Steve, a couple of things. First of all, if anyone has any history there, Galen does. The Silvermine Tavern, we hold about 9,700 seats. The old Silvermine Tavern hold 300. Buses were parked up and down that street, and live music took place there for 50, 60 years. With regards to permits in the barn, first of all, the septic has nothing to do with it. Health, it's a separate issue and has nothing to do with the barn because we don't use bathrooms, and when we do, we bring porta johns in. Relative to the building inspector, I spoke with Billy Ireland. He has no issues with what we're doing. The problem is, with all due respect, Steve, that you have not signed off. They were happy to issue these permits on what we needed. And nothing's really changed. It was never approved for storage. We received a notice of violation for, which was not even a violation, but it was a notice of, that said it was only approved for storage. I'm not sure where that came from, but there's nothing in the language regarding that. The use was defined, it was defined for many years, it's been used, and all of a sudden now, because we have a squeaky wheel next door who continues to hammer town hall, all of a sudden we have to stop what we've been doing, that we've been approved for, and that we rely on because of one individual. And now we're supposed to come back in with all these different applications to codify something that's already been approved. I think it's wrong. What we've done for this area is tremendous. And we'll do the whole 1 million letters, a bunch of people speaking on our behalf, but we shouldn't have to do that. We're here just to operate. We've lost a lot of money. And with all due respect to Steve and the department, they're reacting to one individual who is continually hammering them. And it's wrong.
Commissioner Williams, and then Steve as well.
Yeah, I was just wondering if we had any ideas around conditions. Also, Mr. Glazer had touched on the department's signing off. I'm glad that Mr. Ireland is aware of this. I wonder where police, fire, and the health department would square with this, and also
Happy to
kind of
answer.
fits in with, you know, the Oak Hills or the bunk houses of Norwalk that we also have that are used for events, but also in semi-residential neighborhood.
Right.
Steve, then Tammy.
Sure. And just to be clear, there is also another neighbor that is complaining as well. It's not just one neighbor. Yeah, and again, I'll reiterate, there's no approval in place from any of those departments for this. Not to say that it can't, but there's nothing at the moment.
Tammy?
Yes, so I guess my question is, the way the way the current situation is right now, with a sort of a cease, Mr. Glazer's been asked to cease doing what he had been doing for a while in the barn. Would he have to then apply for a permit, for example, to use his barn, even though it's private property? And if he were, say, having an event, a wedding or something, and somebody wanted to have a band, does he have to apply for a permit to then be able to have that type of a function in the barn?
Yeah, it's our contention that that was never permitted within the barn. It's not spelled out, not allowed. And the path I thought we were going down was that they were which there was different counsel at the time, but they had submitted an application to amend the text to allow those events. Well, they'll probably say they felt that that wasn't necessary, but that was the application that was submitted and ultimately withdrawn. So they had proposed to come in and follow that path initially.
I'd like to see clarity on this. And I think the way we secure this clarity is to quickly schedule this. Have the application done as quickly as Mr. Glazer and his staff can accommodate it. Bring it before us, vote on it. I mean, at this point, I certainly would favor it. And just put it to bed. I'm not sure that if we sort of take an informal vote to approve it tonight, that we have put it to bed, and that it may come back yet again over time to bite everybody in the behind. I think it's best that we go through the formal process and move it forward.
Lou, I appreciate that. And I think, you know, Steve's right. We did contemplate coming in with a text change and some conditions. But unfortunately, when I sat down, with all due respect to my former counsel, and we went through it, again, we are opening ourselves up to something that we should not have to open ourselves up you know, our neighbor he'll hire an attorney, he'll do his thing, and we're gonna go into a public hearing and you're gonna listen to things, and it's just, why am I opening myself up to that? We have the right to do it. We're gonna have a choice. If you don't approve this tonight, then obviously we'll have a choice, and it'll either be, you know, to work with the city on this, or to ensure our rights in another forum. And I don't want to do either one. And I want to run our business. This is important to us, and we take great effort. I'm a neighbor. I live just as close as anybody, and I've got neighbors that I build houses for that are close as that neighbor, and enjoy the idea that we have wedding ceremonies in the barn, and you know, events that are fun and bring people to the area. And what we've done in Silvermine is reinvigorate the area. There's no question about it. Whether any of you have been up there or not, and I hope you have, it's you know, we get sort of rewarded every day by the comments of neighbors and people that walk and bike and come to our place and say thank you so much for it. And it's just, I have to tell you, it's very frustrating to sit here in this forum, not because you are not an understanding group, I know you are, but to be here, quite honestly, and you know, the technicalities, can I get approvals for whoever I need to? Absolutely. I've all talked to them. They have no issues, but zoning is the gatekeeper on this. And to issue us a notice of violation and say it's only used for storage, listen, Steve and I have worked together a long time. We've had our pluses and we've had our negatives. On this one, I strongly disagree with him. And you know, the way these events work, they book a year out. So every month that goes by, we don't book for another year. And that is large money. The margins in the a la carte business are not great. And the only thing that justifies it is the events that we do with these weddings or showers or other things. So I'm sorry to exude, you know, the frustration that you hear, but it's real.
Understood.
Can I ask a question? Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I interrupted you.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, we have two commissioners who have questions, but if you,
Oh, no, they should go.
Commissioner Rowena?
Yes, when was this hearing on this file, on this applicant?
2014.
God, have I been on 10 years?
Possibly. I would say yes.
I remember all of the talk about the valet parking and all that stuff, and I understand, Steve, what you're saying, but I'm pretty sure that's what we had in our minds when we were doing this, that barn was going to be utilized by the tavern. And I think I'm pretty sure that none of the departments can do anything if there's a zoning violation unless there's a zoning sign off. So I can appreciate Mr. Glazer's frustration. And I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm just remembering that's a pretty strong memory that I have, that we kind of knew that was what was happening.
No, that's helpful context, Commissioner Rowena.
Not helpful?
No, very helpful.
Oh.
I don't know who else was on the commission at that time. I think Lou and Galen might have been.
No, that was actually before my time.
That was before your time. Anna, did you have a question?
I did. I had two, actually. I apologize because I missed a few minutes if this already got answered. But these other places that use event spaces, Oak Hills you mentioned, in residential neighborhoods, do they all have sign off from fire, building, health, etc.? That's my first question. I'll pause for answer.
Almost impossible for me to answer that, but I'm assuming that they all do.
They do.
Okay. And then my second question is, do we have a recording of the 2014 meeting? And if we did have a recording and it showed that everybody understood that this was the intended use, could that be enough to say they can continue operations while getting these approvals. And if approvals aren't in hand within 2 months, operations must cease or something like that.
Yeah, I don't believe, I think we did look for that recording at the time because that was pointed out that the minutes are a little bit, they point to something, but they don't provide enough clarity on the matter. But I don't think there is an audio recording, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Richard, did you have another question or comment?
Oh, no, sorry.
Okay. Steve?
Oh, are you?
My shoulder was hurting.
Oh, just real quick. We have no problem we haven't been doing anything in the barn, and we have no problem doing anything in the barn because quite honestly, we don't have anything booked in the barn for the next 4 to 6 months. Obtaining those approvals, I'm happy to say, look, we're not going to do anything in the barn until we have all the approvals, as long as zoning signs off on it. So that's a given. And they're minor. And at this point, really the only thing standing in the way of them is really, quite honestly, zoning signing off. The last thing I will say is I want to be clear about this. We employ 80 people on property, 80 people from all walks of life. And this is more than just a place for people to go. It's also a place for people to work. And these people rely on these jobs and what we've done there to bring them in. And, you know, this has become an important engine of this area. We respect our neighbors, as I said, and you will hear if we ever wanted to go to public hearing, you'll hear from them all. But, you know, again, we abide by the regs and rules, whether we are right there right now. As I said, we're happy not to do anything in the barn, which we can't anyway, and don't have any bookings for until any of these minor details are taken care of.
Steve, did you have a comment? I saw your hand go up and down.
No, yes, maybe small. Yeah, the valet parking is also related to the restaurant itself because it doesn't have its own parking on that property. So they utilize the property across the street. So the patrons drop their car, the valets drive them across the street and park them on that side. Yeah, that's it.
Does what Mr. Glazer says sort of split or would end up meeting the biggest concerns here of nothing happening until the sign off for those entities, assuming we agree that there is intent here for the barn to be used in the way that it's being used?
I'm sorry, can you rephrase that?
So Mr. Glazer said, hey, there's no bookings for the next 4 to 6 months. We'll go ahead, not have any bookings until we get all the appropriate city sign-offs that we need to continue use of the barn in the way that they have been using it for, you know, for whatever amount of time they've been using it in this sort of capacity. It seems to me, if we agree that this is a okay use or the intended use, given the evidence before us, that this could be a middle ground. I don't know if you feel strongly one way or the other on that.
So when the initial application came in, I had actually started crafting conditions of approval for, you know, again, it would have been up to you to vote yay or nay at the end of the day, but I had put together conditions which I thought would have provided protection for the neighbors and addressed some of the current concerns that they raised. They, you know, obviously at a public hearing, they would have the ability to, you know, chime in on all those things. That was the idea with the understanding they would cease doing any events until that time. Provided that they didn't do any further events, we agreed we would not pursue any formal enforcement action with them in addition to what had happened in the past.
And we have complied with that. Just really quickly on the valet parking, and one of the issues brought up was the valet on the street. The traffic department, because the neighbor complained, came out and we said, listen, we're happy to move the valet parking across onto our property, but we want a crosswalk. We can't have our patrons walking across the street with no crosswalk. Unfortunately, the North Traffic Department is unbelievably unhelpful on this aspect. We have a number of crossings because we have 3 properties that cross roads, and we have asked for crosswalks for safety purposes and got nothing from the North Traffic Department, which is incredibly frustrating. But it's you know, it's one of the things that we're continuing to work with. So I don't know what more to say about that, other than, as I say, we spend a tremendous amount of money. Our valets are very careful. They take photograph cars. They make sure there's an open lane. So
Commissioner Tabachnik?
Yes, sorry about that. So just to check for my understanding, because I had first thought that this problem was causing immediate harm to the business. But then the applicant said that they actually don't have any of these special events booked for the next 4 to 6 months. So it's not causing immediate harm to the business.
yes,
There
it
is
is.
time in what way if you don't have anything booked?
We don't have the revenue that we had a year ago or 2 years ago. We have lost $500,000 of business that we had to turn down because we are not allowed to use the barn.
Right, they don't have anything
Okay, so
booked because they couldn't book anything.
Couldn't book anything.
I thought you booked a year out. So you canceled things. This just happened, right?
No, you know what we did in the fall? We had events booked in the barn, and because of the notice, we had to create a situation at another part of our property, putting up a tent and moving all these people over, costing us a tremendous amount of money to do that,
Yeah.
to
So you moved those
not
events.
breach our contracts.
Right now, you don't have anything booked for 4 to 6 months. And
We don't have anything booked at all.
right. Okay.
I couldn't
And
put
so
myself in that
they-
situation with someone.
Okay. So there's nothing to be canceled, nothing is booked. The applicant doesn't want to go to a special hearing because it will take too much time, or like, why couldn't we have a public hearing in December? Get it closed out.
It feels a little bit like double jeopardy, I guess, because
Totally.
you're opening yourself up to the potential of a new appeal. So we went through this, or I didn't, but Mr. Glazer went through this process in 2014. He received the approvals, he cleared all the appeal periods, he constructed all of the buildings, he operated for 10 years, and now it's like he's being asked to hit redo on it. And that's the part that's unsettling. It's sure the public hearing process takes time, and we certainly appreciate the commission's willingness to, make things move quickly. But there are so many unknowns when you open yourself up to a new application process and the new potential for an appeal. The only other thing that I really would like to add, because I know there's a concern about what was the intent back in 2014, and I mentioned the condition. I just want to read you all the language that we're all operating from the same set of facts. So condition number 3 of the special permit says that the valet parking plan dated February 6, 2014 be implemented as needed and made a part of this approval. The valet parking plan dated February 6, 2014 includes language that says, in addition to restaurant regular service, any events that would take place in the barn, such as private parties, weddings, or community events, the valet parking plan would be in place to ensure that all cars would be parked in the designated parking area as opposed to on any adjacent street. And then it goes on to say valet attendant hours required Thursday to Sunday, 5 p.m. to 11 p.m. for all special events in barn and or restaurant.
That's what I remember.
That seems pretty clear.
So hold on one second. Steve, you have your hand up, and then can Steve or Attorney Feinberg, do you have all the conditions of approval? Can we just put that up on the screen after?
Sure.
Go
So
ahead.
as this was kind of an informal process tonight, I'm happy to go back and dig out all my files and put a really long, comprehensive memo together. And I think honestly, I'm going to refute a lot of what was stated tonight. In that, I will go back and, like I said, pull those permits, the permits that were for the barn itself. The zoning permit itself, not the special permit. There's no indication that weddings or anything else is going to occur in that barn. I would be happy to see records showing when the event started in the barn, how long they went back, because it doesn't sound like, or I was never under the impression that there were weddings going on 6, 7 years ago in the barn. I don't remember ever hearing about that or seeing that.
There were.
I understand that, having a lot of experience with uses in residential zones that are similar to this, that the use of the business and the operation changes over time. Weddings and other things like that are definitely more profitable than just running the restaurant. I fully acknowledge that. I can give you a good example from my past job in New Canaan, where the Glass House was a pretty venerable institution in the community. They were back in front of us if it wasn't 2 years, it was 18 months with modifications to their special permit, because the programming changed, and the programming changed based on the needs of the operation, as well as the profitability about some of the events that they wanted to include. And some of those were weddings and larger venue type things. And I understood why, but every time it was a tug of war with the community and the neighbors, because they had concerns related to the impacts that you'd hear about, such as traffic, parking, noise, and lighting. So all those things need to get factored in. My opinion is not going to change regardless of your decision, is that there is no clear track pointing back to what was actually permitted in the barn. Unfortunately, there was a lot of moving parts, I'm sure, with the overall getting the village district approved. So I can see how, things like that just don't get quite clarified. But unfortunately, the lack of clarity has led us to this point tonight. And my opinion is that the use of that barn for event space on the scope and scale that we're seeing is just not in the code.
Steve, when you say scope and scale, do you have any idea what number of events we do there? Do you know that the first winter we were open, we did a Christmas concert in the barn for the community?
That's completely different than hosting.
No, it's not, Steve. These are
I think it's
community events.
100%.
The question, Steve, I'm just going to say this. You're responding to this because one neighbor has hounded you. And now you are taking this approach where the department never took any approach with it. We were well within what we were doing. And now because Peter Lane continues to hammer you, you have brought this up, because before that, there was no issue. We've been doing this. We've been doing it and doing it properly. And now because one neighbor who has been told by friends and family to lay off and stop doing it, and has a financial incentive because he wants to do a subdivision next door, hammers the department. This is why we all have to dance on the head of a pin because of that, and cost us a tremendous amount. At the end of the day, if this doesn't go forward, I can assure you that the business of Gray Barns is not going to survive. And because of we all deal with this. I've been doing this a long time. We've all dealt with neighbors. But in this case, there is such a uniformity of support of this relative to one or two people who have different agendas that are not relative to, quite honestly, what we do in the barn. And I'm sorry that you are taking that on as something that is more than what it is.
Tammy has a question.
Oh, you're on mute,
Muted.
Tammy. Tammy, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Is there anything akin to grandfathering in something like this, where these events have been taking place since 2014 or 15, whenever it was, to the present until this complaint was made?
I don't believe there's any way that's a legal way to do that. No, the structure, yes, but not the use.
We can support the data. We have it.
You don't. Okay. I don't want to keep arguing it out. I'll let you guys make your decision.
So what, are we making a decision, Nick?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's before us if we wanted to. I'm curious what other people think around whether or not it seems like this was an approved use from the original application or not. And then we go, if it was, then they can continue to operate. If it was not, we can go forward. We can also say we want to wait because Steve has said he wanted to put, potentially a different memo together. So I think those are our options of waiting.
Excuse me, Nick.
Go ahead, Lou.
I'd like to put this on the table. I think that Steve putting this memo together is simply going to cost time and slow the process of resolving this. I'd like to propose that we hold a public hearing so that we can finally clarify this and hopefully let Mr. Glazer get back to his business. So I'd make a motion that we move this to public hearing.
Before we act on the motion, I'd like to proffer another alternative.
Okay.
Richard, if just to move it forward, can we see if there's a second? If there isn't a second, then we go to your motion.
I wasn't going to
hear what
motion,
Richard has
but
to say
comment.
first.
I think people want to hear what Richard has to say. I know.
Fine.
Go ahead, Richard.
This is what my feeling is. I've made no secret over the time I've been on the board that I'm like totally against commercial and business enterprises and residential areas. However, the Silvermine Tavern and the attendant buildings is such a unique situation in Norwalk that it's unto itself just a different animal than some of the applications that we've seen for business uses in residential neighborhoods. And the other thing I wanted to say is those pictures that were shown on the condition of the barn or the condition of the inn and the attendant buildings was pretty dramatic. And I do remember, and please, Mr. Glazer, don't take offense at this, but I do remember thinking to myself that he must be crazy taking this project on.
You weren't the first.
But, I felt like at the end of the application, and certainly since I've driven past it a number of times, that he was kind of like the Lone Ranger running into town and taking care of this. So my feeling is that he can't do anything with any of the departments without zoning approval. So we should be talking about the issue about whether we believe that zoning approval was given at the time of the initial hearing in 2014, even though there is arguments on either side, and not putting this out to a public hearing. But that's my opinion.
Sorry, Richard, you're kind of bleeped out on the last thing. Did you say, and not put this out to a public hearing and OT?
That is what I said, yes.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to clarify.
So I think by order, we have to take, go ahead, JJ.
Yeah, I'd like to hear what's, comments from the neighbors and other business establishments, those who oppose or support. I'd like to hear that.
Well, personally, I think it would be a crying shame if Gray Barns went under, because like Richard said, it's an amazingly unique and special place that, Mr. Glazer really took a big chance and vastly improved the area. I went there before when it was kind of falling down, and I've been fortunate enough to go just a couple times in the meantime. And it's such a fantastic place. It's beautiful. It's really, I think, a nice treasure for Norwalk.
Galen has her hand raised.
I was on the commission when this was originally approved, and I remember it, but I don't remember as clearly as Richard does, unfortunately. But I will second what everybody has said about the addition of the Silvermine Tavern and the change in it. We went to the Silvermine Tavern years ago when there were events held at the Silvermine Tavern, then the whole thing closed, it all fell apart. And now it's been brought back, and I agree, it's a pretty unique and valuable piece of property for Norwalk.
Well, I think that's where we are in this,
Is
in this discussion and decision here is, I don't think there's anyone arguing the uniqueness about the Silvermine Tavern. I don't think there's anyone arguing, or it does not appear to me, that there's anyone arguing that the importance of this barn's potential use into keeping the tavern alive. I think the root of the matter is what Richard said was our determination of, was the intent from the get-go, was the approval given so that then they can operate now, or that's not the intent of the approval, and such that they need an additional approval to operate the barn in the way that they are operating. They have been previously operating until they stopped operations. I think that's the nexus here. Sorry, Anna, go ahead.
No, so the application had multiple references to the use of a barn for weddings and events, but the approval that was written by zoning staff, I guess, doesn't spell it out specifically. Could we say that the intention was there, revise the approval to look the way all of our approvals tend to look now and move on? Or is that, can you not, is it possible to revise the approval to add conditions that were missing, like as an oversight, essentially, if that's what we think, without doing a public hearing as an administrative correction?
I don't think you can amend the special permit without doing that. I think you can say, again, I don't know if you've got all the evidence in front of you. Again, like, this really wasn't, we weren't sure if Mr. Glazer was going to go forward with this until Monday, and it's Wednesday. So I think it's a little, like I said, I would like to look at all the facts in the record, not just the documents that were submitted today in terms of some of the other permits and other things. I didn't have time in 2 days to put that kind of research and memo together to put all the pieces together.
I mean, Steve.
Anna, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. How quickly could you go through things and put together a staff memo?
It's not going to be for the 20th, that's for sure.
Okay.
So I think we're still where we are is there's a motion. So what everyone was said, I think the crux of the matter still is for us to determine whether or not the original intent is there or not. Given the evidence that we have,
General intent.
we can say, an option is to say we don't want to make a decision until Steve does more research on that. Again, I don't know if we're going to change things, or if that's the same amount of work that a special permit amendment would end up being. So I want to be mindful of that as well. However, procedurally, there is a motion on the floor from Lou about moving this down the pathway of going back to an amendment for a special permit, which I think behind that is saying the intent behind this was not encompassing of the barn being used in the way that it's used.
I don't think that, no,
No?
I don't think
Okay.
that's what I'm saying. I'm saying, I don't know. And I don't feel comfortable approving something where I don't feel I have enough information, to make a responsible decision. I wonder if we couldn't work two paths at one time. Have Steve go ahead and do the research while we also start moving toward a public hearing, so that there's no delay if that's the final decision we want to make. It would seem to me that we have the option of stopping that process if Steve's information is reasonably unequivocal regarding the original intent.
But honestly, all the information that's submitted, and there's not that much. There are the minutes of the hearing. There's obviously the Silvermine Village District. There are the memos of the consultant. That's kind of it. There's not this, I'm not sure what this deep research is going to turn up. There's nothing else. So there's not a lot, you know, all the documents have been pulled. You know, I have checked with the former, and I understand that I've checked with the former individuals who were involved in the zoning department. And they were very clear about this. You know, that only matters in a court of law because they can be called to witness. But they all of them, I can name names or not, doesn't really matter, but they've all.
I don't think we need to do that.
It's Dory. Mike.
No. I was saying we don't need to do that.
Oh, don't.
No.
Sorry, Nick.
Steve, your hand's back up.
Mr. Glazer. Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you convey to us the average attendance of a wedding or a general event?
So the most we can do is 80 to 85 people on a normal. And when we do that, they buy out the whole property. So there's no more than 80 to 85 people. On a typical Friday or Saturday night, over a course of 2.5 turns, we'll have 180 people on the property. During the week, it's less, obviously, somewhere from 80 to 100, something like that. So initially, there was this whole claim that we were increasing the density. But of course, what we're doing is the converse is we're reducing the density when we do this and reducing the traffic when we do that. So these events that we do using the barn, but again, these events are tavern events. The barn is an accessory, just like it calls out in the Silvermine Village District.
Steve, I think you have your hand up.
Yeah, and the other thing I forgot to mention, which would be also further fact check, is I don't think live music was ever an allowed use in that zone. So that plays into what you can do. I think it's one thing, it's different if you just have people congregating in the building, but when you know, it's pretty hard to not have music at a wedding if the wedding reception piece is going to be at the barn itself.
Steve, then could you clarify if the inn itself, the big inn with the dining, had live music, would that be in question?
So there would be a liquor permit associated with that would indicate if they were approved for live music or not approved for live music. I don't know the answer to that.
Hey, Tammy, you know that the Silvermine Tavern had they had live music forever. Many people played there. It was a well-known place to go, heard live music. Many great jazz players played there. So the history of live music in that place is long and historic.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds though like that's like almost a separate, I don't know if it's a separate or related issue in the sense of if live music is not something that's approved for the zone writ large, that needs to be fixed.
Right. Well, that's what I'm trying to understand is if it's allowed in the inn, is it therefore allowed in the barn? Or if you have a tent,
No.
When you have a wedding in a tent, is the band allowed, or does the tent applicant, one, need to get a permit for the tent, and then two, get a permit for the band? And I'm not clear on that.
Yeah, so the barn, whether you're selling liquor or have music over there, would be a separate permit for that. It wouldn't go across the property lines.
Okay, it doesn't cross the street with it. What if they put a tent either in the parking lot next to the barn or on the backyard of where the inn is? Do they need a separate permit for that?
So that they would need, so the liquor permit would indicate whether they have permission to do live music associated with the liquor permit or not.
Mr. Glazer, do you know if your liquor permit allows that.
So what, two things, Tammy. One is we got through Jack Suchy a full property permit. So we have a liquor that's allowed in all of our buildings, and unfortunately the barn was not specific. So unfortunately, the liquor department went and said you need to get zoning sign off for the barn. Otherwise, it's allowed on all the other properties. There are two other things I suppose I could do. I could hire an outside caterer. I could put up a tent. I could go get a permit, just like everyone else could do on their property, and do it every time if I wanted to. The difference between a tent and a barn is one's a tent, one's a barn, but it's the same exact thing. And anybody can go and do this. And the fact that we're being singled out on this, just because we have a fixed structure that we do, and as opposed to putting a tent up every time we do it, and hiring an outside caterer with their outside liquor license, which can be done. And we can do that if we wanted to. But it just doesn't, it starts to get down to semantics here. And I don't understand it. Listen, guys, some of you know me. I've worked with the commission a long time, for many years. I'm happy to work with them. We do what's proper for the community. We respect them. We end early. I'm not here to sort of torture you guys over this, but I think you can understand how much time and energy we put into renovating this property and operating it properly. We limit the amount of people that were in there because the quality of our food needs to only handle a certain number of people. We spend a tremendous amount of money trying to minimize the effect on the community, and we do, because people tell us that all the time. So I'm sorry to put you in this, kind of conundrum here. But when you really sort of drill down on it, and I understand Steve, but Steve's going to come back, with a memo that's, that's going to say a lot of things, but the context is not there. This happened a long time ago. And only a couple of people were around when we did this, but the language in some of this stuff is very clear. Even if the letter of the law isn't spelled out, the intent is there. And there are plenty of other operations around town where the letter of the law, and I don't want to name some of them, is not spelled out, and yet the understanding is there. I feel like we're being singled out because, as I said, of one neighbor who's making his life's work to harass us and getting way too much airtime.
What if Ms. Feinberg shared that document that she read from so that we could all see it either on the screen or somehow?
Are you talking about the conditions of approval, Tammy?
I believe that is what she read from. Yes, that she just read a little while ago.
Conditions of the valet plan.
Happy to. So this is the valet plan that was associated with the special permit. That's the date that's referenced in the condition of approval. And
sorry, I'll ask for Mr. Schulman. Could you make it a little larger, please?
Thank you.
Sorry.
You're welcome. It's going to help me too, Lou.
And
thank you.
I don't know if you also have, were there additional conditions for the approval? In addition,
what I'm showing you, I can start with the conditions if you want.
We can start here because that's what I think, but I'd like to go to the conditions of approval after. I just want to scan through those.
Okay, no problem.
But for the commission, the question on the table still, the first question is, we need there either a second or not to lose motion, and then we can go from there.
What was your motion again, Lou?
It was to move this to a public hearing.
And that's because you wanted to get more information because we just don't know what was going on in 2014, or because we're required to have a public hearing to amend the approval to require the health department and building and fire sign off.
Two reasons, Anna. One, because I don't believe we've seen anything that absolutely makes the case one way or the other, number one. And number two, to resolve this and give clarity to it and put it to bed so that Mr. Glazer can go on with his business.
Gotcha. Thank you.
What is the purpose of a public hearing?
I think it's the process by which we can have the language which will resolve this issue.
Well, that's,
To like craft conditions based on what we might hear from people. Is that what you're saying?
Well,
And also to provide transparency.
Well, this is a public meeting. But
yeah.
Yeah, but you can't, the public wasn't given an opportunity to speak and it wasn't noticed where they could speak, so I don't think it's fair to allow them to say you had it without putting the proper notification out.
They were given an opportunity to speak in 2014, right?
People, well, depending on who lived there, it could be completely different set of neighbors.
Right, but there was a public hearing involved in that.
Yeah,
Like
at that
there was
time, yes.
the valet plan that talked about the weddings would have been available to the public, and then they would have had a public hearing where people could have said, I don't like this valet plan that talks about a wedding.
the minutes
Not
show
necessarily. That valet plan may have been something that was a requirement of the approval and not ever seen by the commission.
the minutes show that people had questions about the valet plan. The minutes show, the minutes are there. They had questions.
So what does resolution look like to you, Steve?
What do you mean by resolution?
Yeah.
Or like moving forward right
My-
now, we have a suggestion around the public hearing and then text.
Well, I think I think to me, it's questionable. I don't think that the barn was ever approved to be used, as I've said, for these kind of events. Second, there's no indication about live music approval. I think that's also questionable. I think that as I have met with Mr. Glazer numerous times and met with the neighbors as well, my position is the best way to clarify this is to clean up the approval so that way it's codified. Yes, that does open up Mr. Glazer to a possible appeal. I fully understand that, but I think also you guys approving it tonight or just saying, yes, it's okay, opens it up to litigation potentially.
On our end as well, exactly.
Yeah, so I don't, and again, I'm personally, I think that kind of the weddings and events can be held there under, with the proper guardrails put in place, but I don't think there's anything presently in the approval that says, yes, you can definitely do this, or, I think there's a big jump from community carol sings to a private wedding with a DJ. I think it's a big difference.
Yes, the scale is a concern of mine. That's, I think, really the crux of this.
Do you mind going up to the general conditions of this approval?
Sure. In the meantime, if we have a public hearing, and let's just say it's, I don't know, in December or January, could the applicant then just apply for, a wedding permit and a tent permit, like somebody that wants to have one in their backyard? Is that allowed so that his business wouldn't falter in the meantime? I mean, you probably don't have too many events in the winter, but, is there a way for him to run his business in the meantime through a different avenue?
Well, I mean, my opinion is absent your approval to do those events, he can't hold the events.
But he could apply for a permit. He could go to the building department and apply for the tent permit and the band permit, whatever you want to say, right?
Well, my position is that he doesn't have permission to use that space for weddings and those kind of events.
You're telling me my property, Steve?
No, on the barn site.
So when we went, because we had to move, because we were contractually obligated, we had to move a tent, take out a tent permit and put a tent up on our other property, and do that there, that wasn't an issue.
I didn't say that wasn't an issue.
Well, why would it be an issue? I mean,
I know, I think it would
we're-
almost be the same argument that we're having about
Yeah,
this.
I don't want us to go down the rabbit hole. I just want us
yeah, I
to
appreciate that, Darius.
coalesce around.
But it was approved. This thing happened with the tent
Was
on the other property that was approved by somebody at Norwalk.
Yeah, it was approved by the fire marshal, it was approved by the building inspector, it was approved by, you know, everything we needed to be an approval on. And it came at great cost because we had to erect the tent to cover the events that we were contractually obligated to do in the barn. With a tremendous amount of stress and work.
Were there other conditions?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was just showing you another reference before I move back up the
The
doc.
reference here is.
This is in the, so there was a referral to a consultant since it's in the village district. So this is the consultant's report. And so there's a sentence right here that talks about the newly constructed post and beam community barn to be used for community events.
Community events, yeah, the community events part. Okay.
These are the conditions.
So it references the valet plan that we saw. So that plan would have been,
Yeah.
Which
so
talks about.
the plan we saw was dated February 6th.
Correct.
Is there more than 10?
No.
No.
Can we also see the resolution after we finish reading this?
And if we were doing this today, there would have been additional items listed here talking about department sign off and that the barn gets to be an event space. It would have been, if we were doing this today, it would have been spelled out differently than it is here,
Potentially, I think that's
potentially.
the premise.
This seems like the intention was there and they didn't write it as clearly as 2024 would have.
Yeah,
Seems like cleanup.
that was what was intended. But as I say, I don't have this clear memory like Richard does. But
Here's the
it
resolution.
wasn't intended. And I remember the whole discussion and I remember the, you know,
And then after this, can we go to the narrative?
Sure.
That highlight isn't mine, so I don't know why it was highlighted.
Sleight of hand.
the barn was included in the architectural drawings that are referenced here, right?
Yes. And there's also the reference. This is the only reference in the resolution.
I mean, we still have the problem of the live music aspect of not allowed in the zone if we go down that.
I guess in my mind, and I could be completely off base with this, but you know, live music is an accessory component of an event. So I don't know if the regulations at the time considered live. I haven't looked at this, and maybe Steve knows the answer to it. But I don't know that live music was a use in and of itself. But to the extent, you know, that that's a question mark, and if that's the only question mark, then perhaps that's another option for us to resolve just that issue.
Do folks need more time reading this, or can we go to the narrative quickly?
Scroll down. Or
I find the narrative.
This then takes us to the approvals, the conditions, sorry.
Yeah.
Valet parking plan that's referred to.
Above, which is what we started with.
Yeah, yeah.
Did I keep scrolling? Sorry.
Yeah, keep going.
This package came from the city's file, so it's not all in order. So let me just find the narrative. Sorry if I make you all dizzy. And it's repetitive. Here it is. Again, these are not my highlights. So let me find where it's in the bottom. Here it is.
Is there another paragraph below that, or is that the last paragraph?
Well, they make.
Okay. Sorry, this is another reference.
Part of the Silvermine Inn, right? That's what they said, right?
It's Gray Barns.
The community, it's hard to read with all these different highlights. You know,
Sorry, it says within that same area and also along River Road, the new owners are proposing to construct a post and beam community barn that will be part of the new Silvermine. The intent is to offer the barn for community events throughout the year. And then this is the plan that, I'm sorry again for having to turn this for you all. That went with the valet, and you can see the reference to special events.
And for special events.
Okay. Did anybody have any other questions with the information here? We do need to do this procedurally in order of, I think, Lou's motion, if there's a second.
May I share something, Mr. Chairman?
Of course.
Yeah, let me see if I can get the right window.
I know you have 13 screens at home. Pure command center.
Can you read that?
No.
All right, let me find this email. So let me see where the Zoom.
This is an email from,
Not that much.
this is an email from 2024.
Yeah, hold on. Let me
Okay.
see if I can.
August 19th, 2020.
Is that a little better?
Yeah.
This is from the deputy zoning inspector. And again, I'm trying to find, while I'm trying to multitask and look through emails, I think what would be kind of helpful to the discussion and kind of provide some insight is the actual zoning permit for the barn itself and what that actually said, because I'm assuming what he's referencing in his email, and this is the email that went out to some of the different city departments, is that the zoning permit for the barn does not provide approval for the events that were occurring in the barn.
And so this email from Mr. Hayducky was a result of the person that lives in the neighborhood that brought a complaint?
Yeah, this was in response to complaints, yes.
Okay.
And it could have been that the zoning permit for the barn, like, why would the zoning permit for the barn have said storage when
It didn't. It
the
never.
application said other things?
Because I think that goes back, again, that's why I would like to look at this a little more, but I think that goes back to the fact that the information in the initial application was not clear or clearly defined. I think it's, again, it's a jump from neighborhood event barn or that kind of thing to a wedding venue. That's a pretty big escalation in my opinion.
Steve, guys, this is difficult. First of all, what John wrote was was a placeholder to say, okay, Andy, you can't do anything there, so we're going to send you this thing. That was never approved for storage. It is not a wedding venue, and I'm tired of hearing this. Okay, we probably did last year maybe 8 weddings, and probably 7 the year before. They take place in the tavern. This is not Leonard's of Great Neck, okay, where we run weddings through every weekend. And this is getting very frustrating. And with all due respect, Steve, I feel like the decks are stacked against us, because you're taking the position that, you know, that what we're doing is never been approved and never envisioned. And so now we have to come in and open ourselves up to, you know, Joel Green and an appeal and you know, and quite honestly, a real question of this business. And I'm, you know, the commission worked on this a long time ago. With all due respect to everyone that wasn't there, they weren't there. And we have not, you know, I don't know. You're probably getting sick of hearing from me, so I don't know what else to say, guys. But you know, I'll do what the commission wants. What choice do I have? What choice do I have?
Is it possible that the zoning permit was written incorrectly?
Well, I'm not sure what that means.
I wasn't.
Well, the permit, you mean, not the zoning?
The permit, yeah. Steve, you're saying John based his thing on what was on the permit, and then the permit doesn't allow for anything other than storage. Is it possible that whoever wrote the permit just did it wrong? Because you can see what.
Again, without looking at it and having the document in front of me, I mean, I'm assuming Mr. Glazer or somebody representing Mr. Glazer pulled the permit for the barn, and if that barn or if that permit was written incorrectly, they would have addressed it right then and there. They wouldn't have waited. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, if you're going to pull a permit for you want to build a house and the permit says build a shed, I think you're going to say, wait a minute, I'm building a house, not a shed.
Yeah. I mean, well, I agree that community event space is somewhat different from wedding venue or infrequent wedding venue. It's also very different from storage. So
Barn was never,
like,
I mean, you can tell by
the
the
application materials say community event space,
Yeah.
they don't say storage.
Okay. Just trying to think of how do we get to resolution on this.
I mean, maybe, Mr. Chairman, if I might, maybe I can definitely get the zoning permit for the barn itself, and that's pretty easy to forward out, and we can, you know, I don't know what your agenda for the December 4th, we've got a few items on there already, but if there's time, we might be able to at least have that, continue the discussion to look at that piece of it, and then you can make a decision at that point.
What would that, you've already said there's no specific zoning permit. There was a building permit to build the barn, and the barn was operated with the intent that was laid out with the zoning approval.
There'll be a zoning permit to build the barn, and the paperwork, and that should state on there the reasons why they indicated what they indicated.
But Steve, why push this back another meeting? Is it not possible to do what I've suggested? You do your research, but we also move this toward a public hearing, so that if your research is inconclusive, we don't lose time in taking action.
I honestly don't think you'll lose any time, because I think if I'm correct, they probably they might need to do a text amendment as well as modify the special permit, because if the live music wasn't permitted, that's a different can of worms. So I don't necessarily think they're losing any time. Based on what they previously had put together for application materials. That's just my 2 cents.
I mean, guys, I can make everybody's life easier, obviously, if, and Steve's right. We did initially talk about doing a text amendment and some conditions. And if I agreed to do that, you know, that would make obviously all of your lives easier. I appreciate that. Again, it's frustrating when you sit down and look at this and see what we've lost and what we were approved for. And the question is why? And you all know the path. And as soon as we open ourselves up You know, anything can happen, and you know, now we're in a difficult position, and I don't know the answer, guys. As I say, I wish I did. As we've been operating this place for 8-9 years now, and doing it the way that 95% of the community wants us to. So I don't know how to do this. I really don't. I'm sorry.
Well,
Excuse me,
I mean,
is
I
there
would-
a second for lose motion even?
Well, it's hard to. Well,
Hold on, Andy. That's, I hear what you're saying. I appreciate that.
All right, I'll shut up.
No. I totally appreciate that. But that may not be where we're headed towards, maybe. The question I think on the table is there a second for lose motion? And I do not see one yet. Okay, Diana
Second it.
seconds that. So now we move to a roll call vote of moving it
I
down the
just
path.
ask us to consider, if we don't approve this, what do we do?
Well, I think the alternative is a motion that says the intent is more in line with how it's being used in the, you know.
Or a motion to wait and see
Or a
what
motion to wait till
staff
first
produces
staff to produces.
and reconsider at that point. Because can I make a motion that the intent was there to do weddings all along and fix whatever paperwork needs to be fixed so that they can continue what they're doing in a short period of time? Like, can you even do that?
Well, we've got to deal with the motion on the floor.
Let's deal with the motion, but then I think we're a little bit in uncharted territory here.
Yeah.
So I think
And
we
what,
can.
what if I came with you with conditions that you could self-impose conditions that you could use coupled with the obvious intent to use? Would that help?
Steve, does that?
That would have to be part of a modified application. You can't, I don't think you could just do that. There wouldn't be binding.
There's a legality element here that if it's not attached to an amendment process, it's not legally binding. I think that's the path here, or the problem that we're in.
And the amendment process requires a
public
anyway.
hearing because it's a special permit. It's an amendment to a special permit. So we're going in circles.
So what we requested was pursuant to a specific section of your regulations that asks you for advice. It's section 8.3.2.B10. So just so that everyone's clear on if that's on the table, that was what we were asking for, is just advice on, you know, sort of an interpretation of your own regulations and your own approval for your predecessors.
You know, my problem with that, again, you know, it's redundant, but I just don't have enough information to be able to make that declaration. I wish I did.
So based on that 5.8.25, whatever, does that mean that after, at some later point, somebody could motion to provide the applicant advice that it was always supposed to be used for weddings and they need to file for an amendment of their special permit to make it match their current use without a public hearing? That's our advice. Like, can you do that? What does this advice thing really mean?
Steve, I look to you on. I think,
Yeah, I don't think you could do all those things.
Yeah, you could do some of them.
So I think, yeah, so the regulations do allow for application or pre-application items to be on the agenda so you can get feedback before someone makes a commitment one way or the other. This is sort of a hybrid of that, where there was a prior approval with conditions, and there's a question of whether the conditions for that approval permit some of the activities that are occurring on the property now. So we've heard the arguments on both sides.
I mean, it seems to me anything short of going through the public hearing process is going to leave Mr. Glazer in more legal jeopardy than if we go through the public hearing, which is the defined process.
The
Dick,
public hearing doesn't happen unless the applicant decides to file a request for
That's
a zone change.
correct.
So, and they don't want to do that. So like, until they decide to do that, why would we schedule a public hearing?
Yeah, you wouldn't, I think, yeah, Anna is correct on that. I think
It
you
would
would
be-
just,
Oh, sorry.
you would be advising him to that, well, yeah, like, I think that as maybe the chairman pointed out at the beginning, you make a decision on whether you feel the past condition grants him to hold the activities that he's held or is anticipating holding. If you vote yes, then he goes on, and then I would say, you know, he's up to risk for, you know, the neighbors could technically appeal that decision, and then you find out what the court says down the road. Or you say, no, I feel you should come back and amend the application, and then again, he is subject to, you know, if you did approve it down the road, would be also subject to appeal, but you would be in a different position, and so would the applicant at that point.
And if we vote to advise him to keep doing what he's doing, nobody goes in and signs off and makes sure the building is safe and that this, that, and the other happens.
Yeah, so if you're saying that you feel that the past approval contemplated the activities that have occurred and will occur on the site, then I would have to sign off on the permit, and then, you know, then the chips fall where they may that way with the neighbors at that point and other things.
And we wouldn't do any events in there until once zoning signed off, all the other issues were cleared up. It could be a condition.
Commissioner Rowena?
The thing that's the only puzzling part to me on this, I don't have any doubts in my head about the intent. There's enough stuff in the record to, and all that. The part I can't understand, and I hear what Steve is saying, is why the zoning permit says for storage. That makes no sense to me. But yeah, that just makes no sense to me. And I guess if there was any issue that needed to be cleared up in my mind, it would be that. But it seems to me that's got to be a ministerial mistake. Why would the guy go through the subject or the application that he did and then file a permit for a storage shed? That just doesn't make any sense.
I have never seen that.
JJ?
Yes, and I just want some clarity on 2014. What was their definition of a community event?
Are you asking me?
I'm asking the applicant.
Okay, so the community events were events in the barn. Some of them, we've done fundraisers in the barn. We've done Christmas concerts in the barn. We've done weddings in the barn. We've done showers in the barn. We've done yoga in the barn. We've sold bread in the barn. You know, it's a range of things that you have a unique space and you use it in conjunction with, you know, the permits for parking and all those things.
Any pushback on the Christmas concerts?
No, of course, no. No, I think they came, the neighbors. I think they came to that one. It's very, very well intended, but we're not having it this year.
Right, right.
We're not
Can they
having it.
file for a new zoning permit?
What do you mean, just to deal with the ministerial potential error?
Yeah,
that we
like,
don't know.
could they say, like, we don't know why our zoning permit says storage? The commission has provided the advice that
I
the
think that-
intent was
well,
to use it this way,
I'll
and we
let
would like to file a new zoning permit for weddings.
I'll let Steve answer that, but I think based on our advice, everything can fall from there. But I could be wrong on that.
Yeah, I'd say that my position is he couldn't unless you said he could.
So
Is there
Okay.
unless Anna,
difference-
sorry,
After we
Candy,
deal
go.
with Lou's motion, I have another motion.
A point of clarification, I think directed to Steve, is there a difference in a permit between having weddings or special events? Technically, is there, a distinction?
Yeah, there should be. I don't know what they intended or considered that. I mean, that's.
No, not for this applicant, I mean, in general.
Yeah, like if I was, hopefully crafting conditions correctly, I would be very specific on what the events were. Would there be triggers based on the number of people that would be considered like you could say a major event, minor event, those kind of things. It's better to be specific, so that way there's no question going like this going forward, so I'm not spending an hour and a half going back and forth.
So if we said in the application, if the applicant decided to apply for special event status, and then the commission could limit it by number of attendees.
Correct, and that should be based on something. So it should be based on the ability to park that. It should be based on the, if it was all indoors, it would be on the capacity of the building, or could be related to the septic system in this case. So it should be tied back to something. It shouldn't just be a random number.
Steve, can I ask you something?
Sure.
I'm trying to decide, are you opposed to us doing what we talked about, events in the barn?
I think he's
My-
talking about the
No.
scale, which is kind of the crux of what we've been really going back and forth about.
All right.
I'm not opposed to it at all. I'm just saying I don't think you have permission to do it. I think I have no opposition to you filing it. I'm not going to say it's a bad idea or anything else. I'm just saying I don't believe that you have permission to do it right now.
So you'd rather obviously see us do what we talked about earlier, which is come in, ask for a text change with conditions.
That's what I advised. Was it springtime of?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I prefer not to be going back and forth and having my folks go out and investigate, sending out citations and emailing you to say, hey, what's going on here now? And that's why I wanted to get it.
Steve, we have not done anything. We took that seriously. I don't agree with it. We were not approved for storage, but we have not done anything in our barn. So I'm not sure what you're referring that to, but okay. Nick, I'm just gonna let me do this. I'll let everybody off the hook here. Let me discuss it with council about coming back in with the text change. I will give Steve this. About a year and a half ago, he did say, hey, you might want to go in and get this thing more codified because there's a bit of ambiguity that would serve you to get straightened out. Steve did tell me that. It's been a frustrating time and, trying to figure out the right way to go about this and then ultimately, costing us a tremendous amount. We want to do the thing the right way. I don't want to put more burden on you guys have talked to me for a long time tonight, and I'm sorry it's taken this long. So let me discuss with my counsel, and if we think that's the right way to go, we'll do it. And hopefully the commission will understand where we're coming from, and then I guess we'll let the chips fall where they may. So I would say, let me talk to my counsel and
No, I appreciate that.
all right. All right, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you for being willing to invest in our community and for all of the time you put in. And
Thank
we
you.
be the position you're in. So
Thanks.
thank
Thanks,
right.
everybody.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Next is approval of the minutes. Do we have a motion for the November 6th minutes?
Motion to approve.
Do we have a second? Hector seconds. All in favor, we can just do a show of hands. All oppose? Any abstentions? Looks like 2 abstentions.
What date was it?
The November 6th meeting. And then we're going to do the October 16th next.
Approved.
Fantastic. October 16th, do I have a motion for approval? Darius, motions to approve. Do I have a second? Lou, do we have we can just do a show of hands, all in favor? Anyone oppose? Any abstentions?
I have to abstain. I wasn't there.
Tammy and Galen abstain.
I
Motion-
approve. I can't come off video.
Oh, no worries. Comments of the director? Steve, do you have anything? Steve or Brian?
Yeah, just 2 very quick things. One, the affordable housing draft of the plan is in front of the committee there. They'll be looking at it next Monday and discussing it next Monday. So pending that, any edits that come out of that group, we'll circulate it back out for everyone to consume. And I think the idea would be in January, hopefully January, we might see if we can get a joint meeting together with council to talk about the plan and next steps and any other edits. The ultimate goal would be an amendment to the plan of conservation development referencing that plan to help further the recommendations within it. Second item is, and also hopefully in January, I'm working with Mario on a date with one of his partners at his firm to do some training. I posed some questions to them about topics and then questioning whether we break it into 2 sessions. Do we do one joint session on like FOIA issues with like ZBA, Conservation Commission, and some other groups? So I'm just waiting to hear back from him on a game plan. So, but he did say January was the time frame.
Thanks, Steve. That'll be great. Any comments of the commissioners?
I have 2 comments. Excuse me. When the Pearl on Washington Street was approved, they got special consideration because they put in that waterfall. That waterfall has not worked for over a year. Shouldn't we be insisting that it be repaired and operate?
I have to dig into that. I thought they got permission not to use that at one point, but I could be completely mistaken.
Okay. The second issue is related, and that is the mall originally, I think, was going to put in a small ice skating rink, and we permitted them instead to put in a light fixture where you stepped on stepping stones and lights lit up. And as far as I know, that's never been done. It seems to me if people say they're going to do these things, they ought to do them and they ought to maintain them.
Yeah, I'll have to look
Hear,
at that
hear.
too. I do remember that, but I don't recall where that left off. So I'll look.
Okay. Can you report back to us next time we get together, please?
Sure.
Thank you. That's it for me.
Anybody have any other comments, questions, concerns? If that, we'll take a motion to adjourn. Oh, go ahead, Tammy.
Sorry, can I just tell everybody something? I happen to have gone on a tour of Manresa, and I believe they're done for the fall, but if you have the opportunity to sign up to go in the spring, I highly recommend it. You get to see the entire building and you go on the rooftop. It's pretty incredible.
Wow.
And if anyone needs photos or a video of the event, I was there the day of the unveiling. It's pretty impressive.
Thank you. I'd love to see it.
I'm sure that'll be on our agenda in the next coming months.
field trip.
Field
Yes.
trip.
And you get to go around in little ATVs around the whole property too, not just the building. They buzzed you through the forest of all the birch trees and everything too. So, because I'm sure that, you know, something of that is going to come before us at some point in time, not for a couple of years probably, but anyway, go if you can in the spring.
Oh, I think it's going to come faster than that.
Hey, Nick,
Well,
can
they
you
said,
organize
you know,
a
without
site
the,
visit for all of us?
the walk bridge.
We
JJ?
can see about that in the springtime when they do it again. What
Yeah.
well, no, well, I don't know. Well, I'll talk to Steve. I don't know
Mhm.
if we all go together. Is it a meeting, and if we have to deal with
right.
that?
I think if we go all together, we can't talk to each other at all.
Yeah, it gets. I don't know. I'll talk to Steve.
They
Steve,
limit it to 12 people at a time, I think, because they have 2 tour guides and they don't want more than 12 people at once.
we'll figure something out.
Okay.
Anybody else have anything? Galen?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Is
I
there a second?
second.
All in favor? Yay. Everyone have a wonderful Thanksgiving.
Oh,
Thank
good
you for
night.
your
Yes.
patience tonight.
Steve,
Thank
God bless you for your patience.
Yes.
Good night.
Good night.
Okay.
Right.
See you all soon.